When I do online stuff, I call this like the 40-40-20 rule, right? 40% of people on both sides are hard dug in and they're never moving on a position, but there's this kind of like 20% in the middle who are like, oh, you know, I could go either way. And then to that, I would refer back to my prior statement that if you've got people on the left that are saying, I'm not engaging with you, I don't need to, it's not my job to educate you, and people on the right saying, oh my God, come check out PragerU and all these great channels, we'd love to educate you, that the people in the middle are always going to be like, oh, okay, well, these guys on the right seem more open to conversation, so I'm going to trust them more than the people on the left that are trying to shut it all down.
Okay, yeah, I see where you're coming from with that.
The Kyle Rittenhouse thing, I think it was a little cringe. Like,
I was completely and totally right on everything.
Right now, I'm kind of in the middle when it comes to trans people in sports.
My name's Paul.
Okay, my name's Steve. How's it going?
The statement itself, kind of vague. I'm curious about the parameters.
Yeah, so I'm at a school, so one thing I might talk about here would be kind of like it feels like there's kind of like an ideological orthodoxy that's kind of pushed where everybody kind of has to be very, very, very progressive, or else alternate opinions kind of get weeded out over time. So this might be done through like the protesting of conservative speakers or the boycotting of conservative speakers. It might be done through kind of like the reporting of professors who are giving opinions that don't align with kind of like a progressive student body. It might be some of the actions that colleges take in supporting what I would say are like pretty far left kind of like social agendas. So it was Oberlin, I think, that was just recently sued because the college defended there was a black student that got, I think, arrested by a bakery for stealing something, and basically the school came out and said, oh, this company is racist, and they just got like a $30 million settlement the bakery did against the school for essentially claiming that statement. So on colleges, I would talk about, I guess, stuff like that. And then in other senses, it could be things like cancel culture being a little bit too far, or ideological conformity across social media being a little bit too high, I think, where like a very far left opinion is kind of hardcore, forced, then reinforced, and then reinforced again with like terms of service. Yeah. So any of those topics. I feel like all of those have gone a little bit too far. Go for it.
Okay. Yeah, I think with like conservatives being shut down, that's just engagement. That's political engagement, to me. If that's going too far, say like, you know, Charlie Kirk was here last week. There were protests here. People were trying to drown him out. If you're talking about like democratic process of ideals, then the people that were trying to drown him out have every right to do so, just as much as his voice is there to espouse what I feel are absolutely wrong opinions about immigration, trans people, etc. And so when you have somebody coming around that's espousing dangerous ideas, you know, anti-vax rhetoric specifically, then I believe that people do have the right to come and shut that down.
Yeah, so I think that we absolutely have the right, but I would argue that it's kind of damaging to the overall discourse in the United States. So I feel like college campuses are like the best place to bring controversial speakers and have controversial ideas presented in a way that students are able to hear the information, go back to class or different student groups, and then kind of like work through, what did this guy say? Why do we feel like it's wrong? And then have better, more, I guess, inoculated opinions in the future, so that when they go out into the world and they encounter these types of things, they are adequately prepared to deal with them. You bring up like anti-vaxxer stuff is a really good example. A lot of conservatives have a lot of issues with vaccine-related things, and instead of actually engaging on the merits of any of those topics, it feels like a lot of progressives or people on the left in general have found it more appropriate to just kind of like shout it all down and try to shut it all down. And I feel like in that world, there are people that are genuinely undecided, and one side on the right is like, we'll love to talk to you about vaccines and how horrible and evil they are, and the people on the left are like, it's not our job to educate you. You either believe it or, you know, get fucked. Then it's like, okay, well, it feels like in that world, the right is doing a better job at kind of like slowly churning and converting these independents or undecided people, and the left is more like, you're either with us or you're against us, and we're not going to explain why.
In my personal experience and what I've seen, and having engaged with people that are anti-vax, I have brought that information to them, and I feel that I guess the inverse is true, where I have had anti-vaxxers refuse to defend their positions and say, well, it's a matter of bodily autonomy, completely shifting the narrative. And so if you're challenging somebody with scientific evidence, and saying, hey, all you have to do is read these papers. You will see that these things work, or where they come from, etc. And just in my experience personally, I've found that there has been a lot of shifting the conversation
For sure.
with that.
So 2 things on that. So the first thing is, first of all, I do debate like kind of, I'll say professionally online. I've done it for a long time. I fully 1,000,000% agree with both of your points because I see it happen all the time. So the first is that nobody changes their mind in the middle of a debate, ever. That never happens. And I totally agree that that happens. When I look at kind of like political engagement or arguing with other people, usually my goal is to plant the seeds of doubt. So if I have a conversation with somebody and they're telling me that some hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin is the future of medication, and I point out, well, those studies are pretty bad, aren't they? Or I point out that like, well, let's look at like the types of data that you have, and let's just like look at like 2 or 3 of these studies that you're talking about. They might look at that and they go, okay, well, you've got bad studies too, and fine, maybe these are bad, but there's a bunch of other good ones. They hear that one time, nothing's going to happen. They're not going to change their mind, of course, but they hear that reinforced a second or third time, or they start to hear it in other areas. I think over time they become more receptive to those messages, 1. And then 2, something that I factor in when I debate people is, usually if I'm debating somebody, the guy that wants to step up and have an argument is already pretty like ideologically grounded in whatever it is they're arguing. Like, to change their opinion is going to be very difficult. But most conversations like that, whether it's online and it's happening directly, or whether it's in real life and it's more indirect, there's other people kind of listening that I think can be swayed more easily than the 2 people in the conversation. When I do online stuff, I call this like the 40-40-20 rule, right? 40% of people on both sides are hard dug in and they're never moving in a position, but there's this kind of like 20% in the middle who are like, I could go either way. And then to that, I would refer back to my prior statement that if you've got people on the left that are saying, I'm not engaging with you, I don't need to, it's not my job to educate you, and people on the right saying, oh my God, come check out PragerU and all these great channels, we'd love to educate you, that the people in the middle are always going to be like, okay, well, these guys on the right seem more open to conversation, so I'm going to trust them more than the people on the left that are trying to shut it all down.
Okay, yeah, I see where you're coming from with that. Yeah, and with that, okay, so I feel like the reason that I came here, specifically, seeing the wokeness has gone too far banner, wanting to know the parameters. I think that my personal idea of what wokeness is
Sure.
may be different from what your idea of wokeness
Maybe, it might not
is.
be. I mean, there's a lot of different topics. I mean, like cancel culture would be another one, or people that have different opinions about trans people, or people that feel different ways about immigration. Like, I think that we can talk about any of the micro topics, but I think on the macro, I feel like it's all the same. And it's the idea that right now, for culture stuff, it feels like the left very much has kind of their thumbs on all the cultural levers when it comes to schools, when it comes to entertainment, when it comes to social media, which is, I don't think is necessarily bad. But the problem is that it feels like we enforce a very rigid ideological purity. And when that rigidity like takes form, what happens is you start to kick out everybody that isn't ultra ideologically pure, and you're only left kind of preaching to the choir that gets even more farther left, and then everybody else out in the open is like, oh, well, I don't know what to do, and then like the right people basically just start to sweep all those people up.
With cancel culture, though, the same thing applies to conservatives, whether it's like Keurig or Nike or Kaepernick or whatever it might be. That exists heavily with conservatives.
Absolutely, I don't disagree. I absolutely don't disagree. I mean, Trump arguably tried to do it in the worst way by saying the media was the enemy of the people, and he was threatening to open libel laws so they could sue people that published like bad information about him. So yeah, I don't disagree with that for sure.
Yeah, so cancel culture is not an anomaly to the left. It's something that, I mean, it's existed. If you're going to look at like civil disobedience, like you're going to say like Gandhi was like the master of cancel culture because of putting boycotts on British companies, or I think that there's a purpose behind these things. I think that it's something that is given a name that has been ascribed this connotation of it being like this brand new anomaly that has always existed, and now we can give it a dirty word.
Yeah, I agree with you that cancel culture has always existed. Were the right in charge right now, they would exercise it as much as they could. Absolutely. Right now, they're against it because it's hurting them more than it's helping them. But the issue that I have today is that I feel like it's taken a slightly new shape because social media has given us the ability to enforce a single set of social norms across so many different areas in ways that haven't existed in the past. So, for instance, in the past, maybe you boycott a company because they're dumping toxic sludge into a river or something, right? That's totally fine. And you could argue that's a form of cancel culture. Maybe the CEO of a company, says that he hates black people, is not going to hire him. You cancel it. Sure, this is acceptable. That's fine. But I guess the issue I'm having is that, like, do you know who the Bodega Boy is, or the Bodega Guy from New York City? People will release like a TikTok where they'll say something that's like kind of dumb or kind of silly, and people will find this guy's information, and all of a sudden it's like a national or international story that's blown up, and this person's life is like completely and utterly destroyed. And I think we've seen it happen time and time again in pretty ridiculous situations. There was I should remember these schools, but there was a white girl that said she got her driver's license when she was like 16, I think, and she's like, I can drive now, ninjas, but she didn't say ninja, she said the N-word with the A. And there was another student that saved that clip and waited for her to apply to college and then leaked the clip online to get her kicked out of school for something she said when she was 16. Which, I don't know, I feel like when I see stuff like that happening, it's more than just like boycotting powerful people that can't be held to account in any other way. It's, again, on that macro idea, a way of enforcing this ideological rigidity across the entire population.
Okay. Yeah, I see that. Yeah, people that are being, whether you call it being held accountable or they're having their skeletons dragged out of the closet, I think that is, maybe some of it is misplaced aggression because we're focused more on individuals and not on systems. Mm-hmm. But also those individuals can be a symptom of those systems. And so I think that, I mean, if a person's life is ruined, I mean, if we look at someone like Louis C.K., who was like canceled, he's still coming back. He still has a following of diehard fans. I don't think that somebody getting canceled is, if they're a celebrity, especially, is the worst thing in the world to happen to them. Sometimes it can even make their fan base even more fervent.
Sure.
And so I don't really see cancel culture as like the worst thing in the world.
Okay, I'll give you a response, and then I'll give you the last word on it so we can keep moving through people. For ultra larger than life celebrities, I agree that you can escape cancellation sometimes because you have the power to, you just have so many fans, you can either sell shows or you can get on other platforms to do okay. But I would say for like 99% of people that get canceled, you don't really survive getting canceled. If you lose access to like YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, you don't really have a platform. Like, if I'm being honest, like, when was the last public thing you saw from Trump as compared to when he was on Twitter and you would hear about Trump tweets every single day, Like, he has his alternate media platform and sometimes media reports on him, but that guy was almost like wiped from the public eye as a result of being canceled. And that's a billionaire who was the president of the United States. And then also that's just in the realm of the ultra powerful, like really wealthy people. When we go to normal people, right, 16, 17, 18-year-old people that get quote unquote canceled, well, I mean, these people don't have huge fan bases. A lot of them will never, get back to where their life was before, whether we're talking certain journalists or certain like private citizens or students. I think there was a TED Talk that had 3 different cases that they went over where one was that really famous, do you remember the white lady that got on a plane and she was flying to Africa and she's like, hope I don't get AIDS. Oh, I won't because I'm white. Did you ever hear about this?
No, I didn't hear about it.
It was kind of it was a dumb joke, but she was joking that's like, obviously I'm white and privileged. She was a liberal. She was like, I'm white and privileged, I'm not going to get like sick or whatever because blah, blah, blah. And she took off, made that tweet, and by the time she landed, her life was destroyed. She was like fired. There were like thousands of messages in all of her inboxes, millions of reactions online. And it feels like when you can bring the entire weight of the world down on somebody for an individual mistake or stupid statement, the ability for people to make change or have progress, and then the ability for people to have differing opinions, I think starts to be very threatened in a way that is probably detrimental to the long-term health of the overall discourse in the United States. And I'll give you the final word on it.
Yeah, I think that, this is something that's happened time and again, whether it's like, a woman having sex with a man before marriage, back in ye old days. a woman could get canceled for that and suffer a social death. I think that in terms of wokeism, if we're going to look at like the definition of it, ascribing a lens to the way that we look at the world and society, and understanding that there are systemic problems that exist because of our history, and we need to be hyper aware and vigilant of that in order to progress and right whatever wrongs have existed and continue to spill over to this day. And I think that you're going to have some casualties in that, but I think that the amount of suffering that was endured before the present day, that needs to be addressed more than anything. And if we have some people that are losing their jobs or whatever, I mean, think about all the people that have been lynched or just couldn't get jobs because of the color of their skin, not based on, you know, some stupid thing they said on an airplane, or even crying bully when it turns out that they said like a racial epithet. I forget the name of that kid, but I mean, there's all sorts of examples that we can pull from. And I mean, this caught me off guard, so I'm not like fully prepared to talk today.
Okay.
But I do appreciate, you know, having this conversation, and may you have many more.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it, man. Have a good one.
My name is Afif.
Cool. I'm
Nice.
here at Austin.
Let me lead the argument where I thought this was going to go.
Go for it.
I thought you were going to talk about that, like, you spoke briefly on stream about there being like a tether, like a tether to the left side and to like the right, and that there used to be like a consensus that we would meet in the middle, and that the left has sort of secluded itself and just sort of like, I think you used minimum wage as an example. Like people were just shouting out like $50 minimum wage,
Sure.
and you were like, no one's really there to get rid of that. I thought that's what a little bit more of what we were going to be talking about.
You want to talk about that? We can talk about that.
I would
Sure.
love to.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
I feel like in that sense, wokeness has not gone as far as we need, and if it has, it's a necessary evil. Do you remember that Elon Musk meme that he posted where it was like the left like picked up the flag and kept running? And I think you said something along the lines of like, if you think the left is the one that's like ran way further down and like pushed
I
the
know
Overton
what
window.
you're talking about. It.
Yeah,
Feel free to
then
post
you're
it
like,
again.
you're insane, because like the right has gone so extreme in the past couple of years to where they've just been pushing it.
Can I ask you? I'm kind of curious on that. So, I'm not a fan of Trump. You know that.
Yeah.
But where is the right ran extremely far right on?
I've said recently there's been a complete rejection of science, I think, for the most part. We're starting.
Okay, so not to attack my Republican fans, but
Okay.
is that really that different than the Republican Party of old?
Um,
Because they've never really believed in climate change, right?
well, not necessarily, but there's almost like an anti-intellectualism that's been like growing to the point where it's like people are, I think a lot of the right are starting to like support more like extremist figures who just like wholeheartedly disagree with science as a whole. I mean, we saw, I'd hate to use Andrew Tate because he's not like a political person. We saw Andrew Tate recently say something along the lines of like, I don't believe in studies. I believe what I could see with my eyes. And I feel
Sure,
like,
and I understand that, and that's a frustrating point of view. But I would 2 points I would point out. One is that the Republicans have kind of always been that way, so it's not
Yeah.
really that big of a change from their prior positions, especially when you consider that the Republican Party draws heavily from like evangelicals and stuff. These are people, some people believe that the earth is 6,000 years old and dinosaurs didn't exist and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's number one. But the second point I would bring up is I would argue that this is an example of wokeness going too far, in that when you have only one type of political opinion expressed in like college campuses, and when they seem really hostile towards outside political opinions, pretty soon all of your college grads, all of your educated people are going to be almost exclusively liberals,
Yeah.
meaning conservatives are going to be kind of like lost at sea because they don't even feel like college or universities are a place that represent anything that they can take part in.
yeah, for sure. And I can agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, as someone who's like center left, I see like in a lot of my classes, a lot of like things that are expressed that are just like way too far left for like a certain discussion we hold, like especially in economic classes,
Okay.
like to just have like socialist thought just like sort of pushed.
That's really weird. I thought econ departments were usually kind of right-leaning, or at least in my day they were.
Yeah, no, at UT it's very left-leaning.
That's really interesting.
Which is
Okay.
very fun in the sense of like Bachelor of Arts, you get to learn a little bit more about the theory and why we support things, but Bachelor of Science, it does get a little bit more into like conservative views.
Okay, gotcha.
Aside from that, do you feel like, I guess to push the conversation, I feel like you do have some points. Do you feel like conservatives have not gone a little bit more extreme in some areas? Because I feel like with Trump, it's kind of hard to say that they haven't.
It's I don't think they've gone that much more extreme.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit, but I feel like the left is going. At least the progressive wing is going very, 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 very extreme. Like I feel like
Yeah.
the right has changed in some ways, but policy-wise, as much as I hate the guy, Trump was kind of a moderate Republican. He wasn't like an extremely crazy ultra far right. Like where he was far right at would have been like his. I'm trying to think of a word besides fascist, but like the undermining of the institution rhetoric. But that's something that the far left shares as well. The idea that like all of the institutions are broken and we need to like. There's a big overlap between kind of like the Trump rhetoric and the Bernie rhetoric. Not that
Yeah.
they have similar policies, but
Do you not, when you say policy, do you mean the things that they promise, or do you think that they got in action?
kind of both.
Okay, because I feel like with Trump, Trump was an awful president when it came to like getting things.
Yeah, he didn't get
done.
anything passed.
Yeah.
So I kind of have to look at like what was he
So
pushing for. But like I mean like what was the big legislative accomplishment of Trump? It was fucking tax cuts,
Yeah,
right?
but
Which is
I-
like a Republican hallmark, you know?
I feel like when we talk about Trump, we can't talk about the policies that he did. We have to talk about the social changes that he incurred. And I feel like pushing people to be a little bit more like isolationist, maybe a little bit more racist, or like race realist, perhaps.
Is Trump a race realist?
I think that some of the rhetoric about Mexicans and like having
I
certain
don't know, it's
designated
race
groups-
realism. I think it's just kind of
true.
old-timey racism, which again
Old-timey
is kind
racism.
of, no offense, is bog standard for the Republican Party, right?
Okay.
Like if I were to compare the Republican Party of 10 years ago to the Republican Party of today,
Yeah.
especially with things like the Tea Party movement, I see a ton of overlaps. But the kind of like the example that I saw No Opinion give this on Twitter. If I compare like the elitist liberal from like 5 or 10 years ago,
Yeah.
the elitist liberal is a guy that wants like gay rights and more social welfare or something, right?
Yeah.
And today the elitist liberal wants like 4-year-olds to say that they're transgender, and they want like
Okay, I feel like that's an overgeneralization of the left,
it might
right?
seem like it, but so the issue isn't the people that push it. The issue is the people that defend it.
Yeah.
Because when stories like that come out, they're pretty rare cases, I will admit, but then they get a ton of defense.
Okay.
And then you see like these kind of like mainstream figures. I say mainstream, but like college professors making these pretty outlandish statements. There was the one lady that was. I should remember these names. I should have them written down. I remember there was one lady that was giving this speech. I think she was talking about CRT, and it was like. Man, what was it? Was something like if I had a gun, I would load bullets and like kill white people. Like insane comments by like
Yeah.
college professors.
Yeah.
And you see it on Twitter too. Now that it's just Twitter, but like college professors on Twitter saying wild things that are like anti-white. And I feel like 10 years ago, the liberal establishment in the United States wouldn't have been for these types of statements, and they've gotten way, 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 way further to the left.
So I guess, okay, let me try and attack this from a different angle. How would you define like the average centrist like 10 or 15 years ago in regards to like gay rights?
I should remember this.
'Cause I can-
gay rights, gay marriage, was that 2014?
I think so, yeah. That was the Supreme Court decision, yeah?
I feel like gay stuff, it sounds kind of weird to say. I feel like America in general has kind of moved to the left or to the pro-LGBT when it comes
Yeah.
to gay stuff over the past like 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think talking real quick, when you mentioned centrist, centrism is a hard thing to talk about because when people online talk about centrist, they
Yeah.
usually talk about like, oh, I'm a guy that's kind of in the middle on gun rights, in the middle on abortion rights, in the middle on that's not really what a centrist is in the United States. A centrist is usually
Yeah.
somebody like they live like in the Rust Belt and they support Democrats because they want like worker rights, but they're staunchly like pro-life or something. Right?
Yeah.
That's like a centrist, right?
No, I agree.
So insofar as that, like, there's always going to be Americans with like mixed political opinions depending on what geography they're in or how they're raised.
So I guess I would say this. This is where I was going to bring the argument.
Yeah, go for it.
I've seen over like my entire life, I've seen my family is like very center, and my surrounding family, all my family's friends, and their parents. I've seen them on certain issues like race. I've seen most of them go from like a pick up your bootstraps mentality to actually understanding that there's like, oh, there's certain economic situations that people are put in by nature of their birth, that like that whole rabbit hole. I've seen people go from thinking that being gay is like a virus that, you know, infects, so we need to keep it out of our circle,
Ben
to
Carson.
yeah, that to like sometimes maybe we should just keep them like wait, no, that sounds awful.
You're gonna say keep them away from the kids?
I was gonna mimic something I heard one of my friends say. No, like, but like it's just something that like happens in a matter of birth, or it's how you're raised, or something like that, which is still controversial in some circles, but on the same regards, it's wild and leaps
Yeah, I'm
and
not
bounds
going to
better.
deny there hasn't been positive movement, right?
Yeah.
Especially with regards to like trans issues. There's definitely been like really positive
Yeah.
movements. The worry is that, like, if it pushes too far, it's going to snap back, though. And I feel like we've made a ton of progress on trans-related issues, and then the Leah Thomas stuff happened, where there was crazy stuff being said all over the country, and then we saw, like, this huge wave of, like, anti-trans legislation kind of sweeping through the entire United States.
Yeah.
I think in response largely to that one issue. My worry is that if progressives keep pushing and pushing and pushing on those issues, you're going to see these snapbacks. I think we saw it also with, like, BLM and all of the rioting and everything that happened, and the support that was getting from kind of mainstream Democratic figures as well.
Yeah, I feel like my view would be that it's not going to be like a snapback. It's more just like we're pushing the window further to the left, which in general I think you would agree would be a good thing, right? Because as
long as we're bringing everyone kind of with us, and
we wouldn't be. So it would be
Sure.
like, I think there's a pretty defined like independent majority. I think independent is like the most common party in the United States, right? I think
I don't think that's true, but I
that
think
not
there's a lot of
true?
people that identify as independent.
Independent, yeah.
But I think they're a minority, yeah.
That section I feel like is slowly getting more and more converged by the left as like we push the window, and I feel like in general that's a good thing, right? Like wokeness is like our version of like right-wing extremism, which sounds awful to say, but I mean in some sense it's true.
I do agree that like the country has kind of moved to the left as a whole on
Yeah.
a lot of issues. The only issue that I see is because of especially how social media works, you've got sections of the right that are getting kind of left behind.
Yeah.
In terms of like we think we're moving more than we actually are, and that's the thing that worries me. Because in some senses we are moving, and in other senses we haven't even moved nearly as much as we thought. I think a really good wake-up call to that was in 2016 when Trump got elected. I think me and a whole bunch of other liberals/progressives,
Yeah.
when we saw Trump running, it was like, this is the easiest election ever. There's just no way that he's ever winning an election. It's so obvious. Even from the Republican side, you don't make fun of like veterans and shit and get elected. And he did. He did really, really well, which I think was like, oh shit, well, maybe we're not actually moving everybody to the left as much as we think we are. And then when you see kind of like the pushback to some of the other things that have been said that are kind of becoming more hot button cultural wars issues, like whatever that Libs of TikTok account on Twitter is retweeting, or you know whatever things DeSantis is talking about or Abbott is talking about, like I think we just have to be careful not to push it too far, and I think we still have to bring people together to, even if we disagree, to like have conversations, so we're kind of moving everybody.
So you're viewing the right wing as like a reactionary sort of state that's doing it as like a response to like our wokeness for the
A little
most
bit,
part.
yeah.
Okay.
Which is fine. I think reactionaries, well, I mean, I don't agree with them, but I
Yeah.
want them to stay reacting to us and not just do their own thing.
Do
That's the
you
thing.
not feel like in any regard like wokeness is a response to like the right wing?
Absolutely. I don't disagree with that.
Okay. 'cause-
Right wingers go way too far with a lot of shit.
How-
And this is in a way kind of what they've earned, right? Yeah.
Yeah, how I would view it is like there's going to be these two extremes no matter what. And they're going to keep pushing and we're going to keep pushing. And to a certain extent, like by saying things like wokeness has gone too far, we're sort of losing our edge and like pushing the window, right?
Maybe. I mean, but here, so I would feel like the ultimate example of a wokeness has gone too far kind of guy,
Yeah.
President Biden. Because he was a guy that explicitly came in and he said, essentially, wokeness has gone too far. Not really.
Yeah.
But what he said was, I want to work with Republicans and Democrats to get stuff done.
Which isn't a necessary non-woke take, right?
Woke people hate Republicans.
Well,
I
yeah.
don't think they want to work with Republicans on anything. But he came in explicitly with that goal, that he's not a president for Democrats, he's a president for all of America. He wants to work with the left and right, he wants to bring people together, and then he's done that, and I think his first term has been, even if he stopped doing anything, if he dropped dead right now, peace be upon him, that would never happen. But if he did, it would already be like the most successful like first term of a president in like the past like 50 years. It's like unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I think part of that was his kind of rejection of like this ideological purity testing moving further and further to the left,
Yeah.
and more of this idea of like, well, hold on, we need to bring kind of people together with us.
Yeah.
And then I'll give you the last word, but I probably shouldn't have like
More
30
people
minutes.
come in. Yeah, I
so
appreciate
go.
it.
Hit us up with your last
I guess I
word.
would say that like I obviously don't want any politicians being woke, but I feel like in order to like move left-wing issues into like the common, it's like bring ideas like systemic racism, to bring ideas like maybe we shouldn't hate trans people into the fold. I think we do need academia in the sense to like push these ideas even if they're wrong. Like we need some sort of testing ground where like these ideas can be like presented to the public, and but there is a danger, and I do understand that we're just like teaching kids all these things, like maybe it's okay to shoot white people. I guess that's where I would stand, but obviously I wouldn't advocate for like a woke president who would just
Sure.
like block off the other side.
Okay.
Although sometimes that seems effective.
All right,
Yeah.
cool.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man.
All right.
My name's Luca. So wokeness has not gone too far.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
By that I mean that.
Or what type of wokeness would you like to see go farther?
Well, I think it's more about the general attitude, because right now a lot of people, they have that anger built up inside of them from a world that hasn't heard them for so long, that when one small thing, like you said, like the tweet that woman tweeted out, they see one thing that they can take charge of, so that's what they do, and they try to like tweet it out and get everybody canceled for that, when she's not really the bad guy, right? It's really a bigger issue than that. So
Yeah, I agree that absolutely is a thing that happens. I think it's one of the big driving things behind it is you kind of have a lot of like this pent up anger, and then you find an outlet. But isn't that kind of a bad thing?
I agree that it's a bad thing, but I do think that it's understandable, and I think that if the world was more quote-unquote woke and accepting and better integrating other people into society, that you wouldn't have that anger in the first place as much.
Sure, I can understand that. Thank you, Ryan. I can understand that, but something being understandable doesn't make it condonable, right?
Oh, no, I
I
agree.
can understand why some people kill their spouses, but
No, I
probably should never
think
do that,
it's-
right?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's wrong to, I guess, attack somebody's whole career over something if the initial thing wasn't that big, right? Like,
Also,
But-
isn't it possible, like, over time to build more acceptance for different groups of people without having to be, like, ultra woke or ultra rigid about it?
yes, but I think that, like,
Because
so
one of the
what
things
would
I
you
guess
sug-
one of the things I
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
worry about is that if you push too far and you leave one group of people too far behind,
they're going to be those angry people
not only that, but we end up thinking we've made more progress than we actually have. So
because
like
we're just silenced.
yeah, so like two things I would point to is one is the Leah Thomas thing. I think that when that happened, I think that represented a bit of a snapback where people were like, wait a second, this is way too much.
I'm sorry, could you remind me? I'm sure I've heard
So
it.
Leah Thomas was a trans swimmer that
Oh, yes.
made it
Okay.
very far, and then after this happened, it became a national discourse. People got really mad about it, and then you saw a lot of anti-trans sentiment start to boil
Yeah,
up
most-
across the United States
most
for what I think were largely avoidable reasons. It wasn't a debate that needed to happen on a national stage, and it was a debate where a lot of progressives, I think, were kind of baited into taking a really dumb side.
So you think that trans women should not be in sports?
I don't think they should be competing with cisgender women,
Okay.
and I think most of the research supports that so far.
Do you think that it's because, like you said, there really wasn't an issue about it until Leah Thomas became on, like, when she was on the headlines?
Yeah, of course.
So before that, I'm wondering, like, why wasn't it a big issue? Why weren't we seeing them on the top 1% winning every single?
I mean, probably because your
Just
things
because
are going to
the-
be relevant based on like what's in the news. So like for instance, it might be the case that we're doing drone attacks in Syria or Yemen or whatever, but we only hear about it when like a hospital gets blown up or
I
something
agree.
big happens, and it's like, oh, and you might say like, well, why didn't we care about it before? And it's like, well, it just wasn't in the headlines before, you know.
So where do you think that wokeness is going to take us then?
Yeah, so again, the issues that I have is that either one, it makes us think we've made more progress than we actually have.
Yeah.
So in the case of like Leah Thomas, trans people, that's one thing. For a second example, abortion. Abortion is an issue that is not even close to settled in the United
Yeah.
States, and I think we felt we'd made more progress on it than we actually had.
I
When the
agree.
reality was, it was like a couple Supreme Court cases that really gave us all of the legal grounding and all of the precedents for abortion, and that was never codified in law.
Do you think any of that comes from like a lack of education on, or do you think that people, if they had all the resources in front of them, do you think that they would still?
I don't think it's a matter of education or resource. I think it's a matter of
Okay.
engagement, where I think at some point, and maybe it's always been like this, and I'm just, this is just my day and age, and I see it happen more than it used to. But it feels like at some point the left basically started saying we don't need to engage with people on the right anymore. Like,
I agree.
We like we're done with these people, and then you get these people like Jordan Peterson, or now people like Andrew Tate that rise up and become massively successful, and they've got this huge audience of what the left would call incel, men.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, why do you guys listen to these people? They're so hateful and evil. And it's like, well, you guys basically said F you to all of these guys. You said F men are rapists, men are evil, white people are evil, commit the Mayo-cide, etc. And why are you surprised then that all of these kind of like disaffected young white men are now, who are graduating college, 40, 60 compared to women who have no voices in media that aren't like constantly demonizing them? Why would you be surprised that now they're listening to figures like Andrew Tate or Jordan Peterson? Like it seems like it's going to be the logical extension of what you said earlier, that when people aren't heard and they've got a lot of anger, that will come to the surface in the form
Do
of.
you believe in horseshoe theory?
I
that's
don't like
how I
the
think of
name,
it a
but
little
I mean,
bit.
like, yeah, I guess it happens to some extent in a little.
Do you think there's ever a place that we could come to where there would be that agreement, or do you think everybody's just always going to be in disagreement about these things? Like, do you think there's any kind of middle ground that we could come to, or?
I don't care about disagreement.
Okay.
I think disagreement is fine. There
Is
should
the
be
harm,
disagreement.
or?
You find yourself agreeing with a conservative on everything, there's a big problem.
Yeah.
But there needs to be disagreement and not disconnectedness, right?
Okay.
If I see like two people disagree with each other, that's fine and that's healthy, because in some ways it's grounding both of them in reality. Because if I'm forced to talk to a person that believes a certain thing that's different than me, and I have to have a conversation, at some level we have to be able to communicate back and forth with each other. The scary thing is when the disagreement stops and the disconnectedness starts, and then everybody's
just
in their
building
own
your
world
own-
talking about
yeah.
things, and you've got like sometimes relatively large figures arguing for things like third trimester late stage abortions, right? This is something that not even the majority of the the Democratic Party agrees on.
That's one of those things that makes me think it's just a lack of education, though. Because
I mean, we call it education, but like
Yeah.
I think it
or
just
just
has
knowledge on the. Because I agree very much with your pro-choice stance.
Okay.
So that's why that's where that's coming from. I think that when the part of the brain develops that actually allows for that, because right now we still don't know where consciousness even comes from. That's a big philosophical debate. It has been
true.
for a
Definitely
very long
not from
time.
animals.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, but it's just been it's been a huge debate for a really long time. So I think that's where the horseshoe theory kind of comes into play, because I don't think anybody's ever gonna agree until we agree on the base question. Does
Sure.
that make sense?
And in order to have those base questions be agreed
do need
upon,
to-
you have to have like
I agree.
conversation. Yeah.
I agree with you. Okay.
When it comes to wokeness, obviously wokeness is kind of like a logical extension of things that have happened in the past, like civil rights movement. And, when we're saying that it's gone too far, we can talk about like byproducts of it, cancel culture, individuals getting canceled for things they say or stuff they do at their job or whatever.
Yeah.
But when we talk about like the overall effect of wokeness and the ability to like, rainbow capitalism, like pressure corporations to kind of market more to that side of the culture. When it would be one thing if like Nike, they feel the need to like put a rainbow flag or whatever up for their profile picture during Pride Month, but they don't really, they're never saying like we support, the nuclear family. Like, they're not going to do like some sort of commercial where they have like a man and a wife and they're like traditional marriage, So
Yeah, I don't have a problem with like the rainbow. I love rainbow capitalism. It's better than no capitalism, or it's better than like I guess straight only capitalism, right?
Right.
Like it's fine to have representation and flags and all of that. I guess my issue more specifically with kind of like the woke culture is it's this hyper cancellation of things that we view as being like a little bit not the same as us, or the exaggeration or the blowing out of like certain events in order to enforce like this very rigid kind of like moral standard across all of society. I think that's gotten really damaging over time, and it's the issue that I have. So do you know who I am or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So I do debate online a lot, right?
Right, yeah.
One of the issues that I run into when I argue in real life, I use my mom sometimes as like a sounding board to figure out where I'm at, is when I start to argue, what I immediately have to do is I have to disavow like 5 or 6 different things that are happening on my side before I can even have a conversation, because they're so
Right.
toxic to the discourse.
Yeah.
Like I remember like, dude, my mom, when I tried to argue for a while that like, I don't think people go too hard on cancel culture, blah, 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 my mom brought up the Covington Kids thing over and over and over thing. Do you remember that?
Was
White
it the
high
like,
schooler,
the-
awkward
in
kid.
DC or whatever, where they were? Was it some rally and?
It was like there was like an awkward white high school kid, and there was like there's another dude banging a drum next to him, and people were saying that like he was laughing at the guy and making fun of him for being indigenous. And
Was he wearing like a Trump hat or something?
I think he wearing a MAGA hat. Yeah, he was. He was
or
wearing a MAGA
something
hat.
like that. I don't know.
Thanks, Jamie. People blew that up like crazy.
Just 'cause he was wearing, like,
because he's wearing a MAGA hat, yeah.
Right.
Or the amount of people that say like if you've got Blue Lives Matter flags, you're a fascist. If you support Trump, you're evil, Hitler, racist, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And it's like the ideological rigidity there makes
Yeah.
it so hard, in my opinion, to kind of flip people over in the future, where like conversations where you have engagement and you slowly kind of spread ideas feels way more successful than this like blanket of uncomfortable silence where if anybody says anything even slightly out of the norm, we're going to destroy your life.
And I think it's relevant because of where we're at now. But if we just considered wokeism or whatever as an opposing force to what existed prior to that, which was like traditional norms, pressure from authority, the government literally reinforcing this like traditional social norm that is opposed to wokeism. Wokeism's kind of like a reactionary force in a sense.
I do agree.
And so you kind of want opposing reactionary forces. Now I can say, obviously right now, if we were to look at wokeism and we look at cancel culture and stuff, we'd say, okay, maybe it's too much.
Yeah.
But my fear is that's especially true maybe in the U.S., maybe even only in like more liberal parts of the U.S.
Is it?
But outside the U.S., outside in other countries, which I know we're not talking about other countries, but I'm just saying that like that traditional force is still there, and in other countries it's so prevalent that the wokeness isn't even a thing. Right?
For sure. So I'll do one thing and then I'll give you the final word on this.
Okay.
Is it not possible to be just a little bit more measured in how we function? Like, I understand that there's a temptation to say that, the conservatives, when it was their time, and they wanted to, attack everybody that was LGBT. They demonized men for wearing earrings, wearing the whole metrosexual thing. They attacked boy bands and rappers and all. Just conservatives have always done like crazy stuff when they've been given the ability to cancel people, right? We saw James Gunn get canceled for tweets that were over 10 years old by Cernovich on Twitter. It was like insane. He got kicked off in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 over that. It was ridiculous. So I agree that conservatives do it, but like could we not have a better, more measured response? Does it always have to be like, well, we were here, and now we're here, and now we're there, and now we're there? Like, I feel like
Right.
at some point it's going to get so extreme that we're just going to like break off from each other, and you're going to get one of these like national divorces or whatever
Yeah.
people talk about, you know.
And in which sense, you know,
And then this is the final word I'll give.
okay,
it to you. Go
final
for
word.
it.
So in that sense, you know, I think it's hard to ride the fine line of disavowing when wokeism goes too far. I mean, because you don't want to kind of feed into this energy that we need to get rid of it. In a sense, you want to just call out the behaviors in it that you disagree with, but you know, it's a fine line. You know,
Yeah, I
You
agree.
don't
Yeah,
wanna
of
push
course.
too
You don't
much.
want to push all of it
You
away.
don't want the pendulum to swing the other way, is all I'm saying.
For
so
sure. Okay.
that's
Well,
what
hey,
I
listen, I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, it was good talking to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, wokeness. The maintenance of this very kind of like rigid ideology that like tries to excise anybody that doesn't conform to it. I think it's gone
Okay.
way too far. Social media colleges, where do you want to go?
I mean, I think a good place to start would be like, because like wokeness is such like a vague term, and it can mean anything.
Yeah, I think this
from
it's like this idea of like this thing that basically kind of like self-polices everybody and kicks out people with like any slightly differing opinion. I feel like that's how it's exercised the most today, and I feel like that's like the most toxic, like incantation, the most toxic. There's a word I'm looking for, but the most toxic way that it appears and
Okay.
how it's enforced online, and that's the thing I'm kind of pushing against.
Okay.
We've lost
Well,
the ability to talk to each other.
I think the problem with like trying to characterize like wokeness in that way is that it's like strongly controlled by like a reactionary narrative of like, you know, wokeness is anything from like including black people and like media to like desexualizing like fucking cartoon characters. And obviously those two things are like vastly different and their implications.
Yeah.
So you can't like put them together.
I agree with you. So, like, obviously, I mean, I don't know if I'm a progressive anymore. I think I am. But, like, I'm in favor of, like, LGBT rights,
Yeah.
of, I don't know about desexualizing cartoon characters. I like my Lola bunnies. But, like, the ideas, like, the policy positions generally of, like, woke people are things I would support. And I think that those are things that can be fought for publicly. And I
Right.
think we can do a good job fighting for those publicly. But the hyper rabid cancel culture and like the hyper rabid fixation on these like very small like microaggressive things,
Yeah.
or the like witch hunting people that have dreadlocks, or that say like a dumb thing on TikTok, or that tweeted out something dumb when they were 16. Like, these are the types of things I see. I remember the I want to say it was Teen Vogue, I think, where like an editor came in, a new editor-in-chief, I think, and I think she got canceled by one of the other people because 11 years earlier, I think she tweeted out that like Asian TAs were too strict in college classes, and she lost the job for that. And then I think the woman that canceled her ended up losing her job because she tweeted out something stupid 5 years earlier. And like this kind of stuff I think it's becoming more and more prevalent on social media. I'm like, it seems a little ridiculous.
Yeah, but I think like those are like fringe cases that like don't really affect a lot of people. And it, also another like issue with like saying like cancel culture is a huge problem is like that also has like a wide range of like, you know, it could be stuff like old tweets, which I mean, I think you brought up James Gunn. I mean, he still ended up directing the movies. He got
Eventually, I think he came back on for Guardians of the Galaxy 3.
yeah. So
I do agree that sometimes it can be too specific, or people can blow up like they'll see something on Twitter and they're like, oh my god, this is everything, right?
Yeah.
The two differences I would point out is that one, so I had that same position 6 years ago when I argued with people online, especially people like Sargon and everything. And what people would say is, people would say that like, we need to do something about this. This is the end of the world. And it would be some lady with blue hair screaming, and she's got like 4 likes on Twitter. And it's like, why do you care? But the issue is now I'm seeing tweets that will have like 80, 90, 100,000 likes saying insane things, sometimes coming from like tenured college professors, sometimes at Ivy League colleges. And now I'm like, okay, well, now this is starting to feel a lot different. And then you're even seeing like the creation of some conservative figures out of these like ultra woke movements. Like, I would argue that it's Brett Weinstein. Brett is the one that came from the college, right? Not Harvey. Harvey's the raper guy.
Yeah, Harvey
Yeah,
isn't
Brett Weinstein.
Hollywood.
His entire like conservative life essentially was created by students that I feel were unreasonably like harsh towards him when it came time for that like white people to take a day off campus thing. And like that's a whole conservative career that was spun out of a whole college being way too reactionary in regards to like woke. topics, I think.
yeah, but I think focusing on like that aspect of like, you know, I feel like that is still like being controlled by like a reactionary sort of view of like, you know, are we going too far? Like, you know, let's hit the brakes. Let's actually like think about this more. I think that more so comes from like a
From a conservative point of view?
yeah, it's more conservative, but like
You don't think it's possible? Because, like, I worry from the progressive point of view that it's like self-destructive. Did you
Well-
ever follow the Force the Vote movement?
force the vote.
Yeah. Like, Jimmy Dore and a bunch of other people were basically saying that, like, the 4 progressives in the House should, like, suicide their entire political careers to try to force a vote on Medicare for all, knowing that it would fail.
Well,
I don't know. Like, stuff like that is just, like, the ideological rigidity.
well,
Sorry,
like
I kind of cut you off.
well,
there.
like Brett and Brett Weinstein, or is it Brett Weinstein? Or I'm
Yeah,
thinking of, I'm
Brett
thinking
Weinstein.
of Eric Weinstein. I think.
I think Eric is his brother. It's Brett and Eric. Right?
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
but Brett
they're
is the
both
guy
sort
that-
of like lost their minds during COVID.
Sure. Yes, a lot of
and
people
so
lost their
has
minds
Jimmy
during COVID,
Dore as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I think like when you start looking at like progressives and what they care about and like what they think is important, and you start making that like an issue that is like really affecting people and like really being a weight on people, that's like the beginning of the end, where you start to like go down this path of like, you know, if we let wokeness win here, then like, you know, we're gonna be controlled by an authoritarian government here, and like
I'll give you a response to that, and I'll give you the last word, okay?
Sure.
I agree that you don't want to attack. Like, my goal would never be like, well, maybe do gay people really need to get married? That's not what I'm saying, right? I don't. That's not the point of view I'm looking at. I'm more attacking kind of the rhetoric behind the movement, the idea that like you are either fully 100% on board with what we're doing, or you are a fascist enemy, Nazi of the people, and you need to be eliminated from as many parts of reality as possible.
Yeah.
And for that example that I gave. I really don't like Brett Weinstein. I really don't like almost everything he's had to say about vaccines, which is supposed to be an area that I would expect to know a little bit more about. And all of his political commentary is, in my opinion, garbage. But when I look at the original videos of him at Evergreen, he looked like a guy that if you spoke to him reasonably, he might not fully agree with it, but he'd be like, okay, yeah, I can definitely see your point of view.
Yeah.
And progressives will do this thing where they'll look at like the BLM riots and they'll go, okay, sure, there was a lot of damage, but what do you expect when all of these voices are unheard? What do you expect when there's this much anger and resentment? It's going to boil up in the form of riot. Riots are the language of the unheard. I've had that Martin Luther King quote thrown at me over and over again. It's like, okay, fine, sure. But then when you look at conservatives that end up going full reactionary, and people are like, why would you do that? And it's like, well, look at how you've treated them. Like, look at what you've done. Of course they're going to be full reactionary. Why would you expect them to be any different? And I'll give you the last word on it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you gotta have like thick skin if you're gonna have a political discourse. I mean, like, if you're gonna let your values be jeopardized by people treating you badly, and you're gonna let that change your entire worldview and let it lead you down this like path of conservatism and reactionary thinking, then like maybe you shouldn't be involved in politics at all. Like, maybe you should take a step back and evaluate who you are as a person, and like really find what it is you believe in.
Would you say that same thing to a black person whose politics become very jaded because of certain interactions with people? That's my last question, then I'll give you that. Go ahead.
What do you mean by that?
Well, like, because people can write off whole groups of people or get very negative in response to like a couple of bad interactions with people. So like if a minority was telling you, it could be LGBT, it could be racial, it could be a woman or whatever, if they're saying like, oh, well, I don't like this group of people, I don't like these people because of that, would you say like, well, is it really fair to say that, or should you go back to the drawing board and maybe reanalyze a bit?
No, I think those are like completely different experiences. Like the experiences of being like a black person in America and the experience of being like a conservative in America are not like comparable in like any way.
Okay, all right. Well, hey, I appreciate it. Josh,
Thank
right?
you. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the conversation.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah,
Do
I'm
you know,
Sebastian.
Sebastian, do you know who I am or anything?
Yeah, no, I used to watch you freshman year of high school.
Used to watch me. Hold on, who do you watch now?
I mean, I don't
Speak
think
right in the microphone if you can.
I don't think there's got to be a replacement. I don't know. I'm not really into like the debate type streamer stuff anymore. I guess when I was like a freshman, I moved to Texas when I was like a freshman, like before freshman high school. So like I went through a lot of, I guess, political soul searching, and part of that was like watching a bunch of YouTube videos, like, you know, whatever.
Oh, you're in the video essayist now.
Yeah, well,
oh,
yeah,
no.
I'm not into video essays now. I'm just in that.
I'm just messing with you. You're good. Make sure you speak right in the mic.
All right,
in the
cool.
top,
I guess, gotcha.
Top of the microphone.
All right, cool. So I guess
Yeah, okay.
the reason I'm here is I guess I was curious about like the wokeness position. I don't know what kind of audience you're getting up here, but I mean, I'm interested in doing the change your mind of wokeness has gone too far. I guess to start off that conversation, like, what do you mean by wokeness, I guess. Like, there's a lot of ambiguity surrounding
for
that
sure.
term.
So the topic is pretty broad, so that people can talk about the particular issue that they want. But the kind of macro issue that I'm talking about is the enforcement of this ideological rigidity that demands the excise of like anybody that doesn't 100% conform to the ideology.
Okay.
And this might express itself in the ways of like a certain progressive orthodoxy that's showing up across all of college campuses. It might be the way that we cancel people on Twitter for mistakes they made when they were 14 or 15. It might be in the way that we police like certain types of media. Like, yeah, you can kind of go wherever you want with it, but
Okay, well, I guess, I mean, if we're debating like wokeness has gone too far as a broad thing, I guess my question is like, what is your sticking point for this debate? Like, how would you say wokeness has gone too far? Like,
yeah,
what's
my
the-
issue is it feels like progressives has essentially built up this impenetrable fortress of rationale for why you never have to engage with somebody that disagrees with you. And I think that is the worst possible way that public discourse can go, where you have all of these kind of like self-justifying reasons for why you don't have to actually talk to somebody that disagrees with you. Like, I don't platform conservatives because they're bad faiths. Fascism delights in liberals trying to be nice to them. These people aren't going to argue seriously anyway, et cetera, et cetera. Like all of these ideas to basically say like we never talk to them, we don't want to platform them, we don't want to do anything, and then yeah.
So I guess I don't really know if there's like a concrete example of this in the mainstream, because I think when people talk about wokeness, it's very much like it's intentionally ambiguous, right? It doesn't have a concrete meaning. Like if you're any like Republican pundit or talking like any talking point regarding wokeness, it doesn't mean anything. It's a vague term. But I guess to what you're saying, I guess I just don't really see a where's the mainstream enforcement of this, right? Like beyond, I guess, a few people canceling people on Twitter. Like,
well, it feels like so on college campuses, it feels like there's a big pressure for college staff, whether it's coming from administration or students, to kind of all conform to like a certain kind of like political slant. And then if they don't conform to a political slant, students will start writing student bodies, students will start contacting administrators, and then there's kind of like this pressure that's being pushed onto these like professors, where it's like you kind of have to be in favor of these particular things, otherwise you're going to get hardcore boycotted, hardcore threatened. And then Brett Weinstein is like would be an example of this, like at Evergreen College.
Okay, so let's go more than that example. What happened? Like, what's the?
So I think essentially was the school had a history of they had like a day off for minority. I think it was for black students, not minority. I think it was for black students particularly, saying that like we're going to leave campus for one day so that you can see what it's like without us, to kind of show you that like minorities are important. We need black people in the world, and then. Somehow at some point I think this flipped and they were saying, well, we want to do a different type of day off where white people are asked to leave college campus. And I think Brett Weinstein disagreed with that. He's like, well, it seems kind of weird. Like before it was a voluntary thing where black people were moving themselves to show the importance of how they're needed in day-to-day life, but asking white people to leave is like, it's a very strange thing. And he got like hardcore protested. It was insane. The entire student like body's response to his statements about that, such that eventually he fled the school. I think they settled for something. I mean, it was, and then he basically spun off like a whole conservative career on.
Okay, well, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, the outrage to grifter pipeline's kind of funny, but I guess, I mean, if we're looking at this like wokeness as a large scale problem, I guess this is like one instance, right? Like stupid shit happens on college campuses all the time, right? Students do a bunch of stuff, and I guess to me it's not surprising that a campus that would even have the popular support to engage in a protest like that in the first place, not surprising that they would then protest the professor. So like, I guess I don't really see how that points towards a trend of like this woke framework enforcing this kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't bring like a whole list of examples with me, but like recently, the Oberlin College was just settled with a bakery outside the college for like it was like $30 million because I think there was a black person that tried to steal something from the bakery, and then the security came out, caught the guy, and then the student body, and eventually the college came out and condemned the bakery for being racist with no evidence and no proof, and eventually the bakery sued the college for being like, you can't just say that we're racist, this is completely unfair, and they ended up winning like a huge settlement over it. That would be an example. In Washington State.
I guess if you're able to win a lawsuit and you're like, oh, you did this unfair, like how is that really like? Does that really demonstrate like a wokeness having this like grip on society? Because all the examples you mentioned, like, okay, sure, I guess it's outrageous that these people are getting targeted for this at all. But like, what's the material effect of that on like public discourse?
Well, the material
like,
effect is that one, it demonstrates that one, the college students all have a very hardcore political bent, and two, the scary thing, which is fine because, by the way, I totally agree with you. Young people are going to tend to be liberal. Like, look at the protests to Vietnam, right? This is all across college campuses in the United States. I absolutely agree with that. The scary thing, though, is that I feel like it's a college's job, with the faculty especially, and then to some extent the administration, to hold the students to kind of like account. Like, okay, well, you believe this, well, let's challenge it in this way. Let's flesh out your opinion a little bit more. But when the colleges start siding with the students, and then they start being part of that movement, that gets really scary to me. And then a third example I'll bring up where this shows up in research is at Washington, I think it was Washington State University, there was a trans study for, I think it was puberty blockers given to minorities, not minorities, to minors. Puberty blockers were given to minors, and the headlines for the study was that puberty blockers show a massive decrease in suicidality, et cetera, et cetera. That was the headlines that were published. Well, it came out that upon further review of the actual study itself, there was almost no effect at all. It was almost a wash by the end. And internal emails were leaked from the college university that said, okay, well, we see that it's changed, but like we're not going to publish anything about this because we got a lot of really good press from the last headlines that we published. And to see a university say that in regards to research is really scary because as soon as those statements come out, now all the conservatives that are on board with people like DeSantis are saying, well, look, you guys are suppressing research that's showing that. Then that's another example of like,
the way I would see it, like, I mean, I obviously know you're a liberal on the left or whatever, right? I think these people who like manufacture outrage about studies like that, I don't really feel like they need an excuse. Obviously, you're right.
Manufactured outrage, isn't that pretty outrageous?
I'm not saying it's manufactured, right? But I mean, if you look across
the left is manufacturing it. That's my issue.
Well, no, if you look across the entirety of a country, right? Obviously, like stupid shit's gonna happen. Some universities gonna have some scandal, right? It's almost inevitable. It's just like a numbers game, right? Of course, that's gonna happen somewhere. You're always gonna be able to find an instance of like wokeness is doing X, Y, Z in any place on the planet, because of course, you know, college students sometimes have that little bias. It's more homogenous and expressed in one campus over another. I don't really think that necessarily points to a systemic problem of wokeness as much as, I guess, other factors that could lead academia to be right? It's common in like studies all over the place to manipulate data to fit a certain narrative, right? It's like there's like p-hacking, tons of ways to get data or a headline to say what you want, right? But like, aren't these universities kind of just responding to the pressure of their students, right? If, for example,
should they be responding to pressure from students?
I guess I'm not really asking if they should. I just feel like it's kind of like a law of how public or private institutions work, right? These people want people to attend their universities, right? If these people, right, the people running the university see that like their entire student body is doing X, Y, Z, I don't really feel like it's a crime of wokeness so much as it is like the structure of an institution really not being insulated by the people who attend it, right? Those people are always going to put pressure on them.
Sure, but I feel like the institution of college, it's supposed to be ideally like the last place you can go and be made uncomfortable and then be forced to figure out like how to deal with it, right? Because by the time you're in the workplace, no one should be making you uncomfortable, you know, and your family life and everything, people shouldn't be challenging you hardcore. But in college, that's a place where somebody can introduce you to like an uncomfortable idea and then you'd be forced to kind of sit with it and evaluate it.
I guess it's like more of a discussion about like, oh, what is the purpose of like college as an institution? I mean, there's no set rule, there's no regulation like, oh, college should be this, right?
I would argue that college should be something, right?
Well, I mean, I understand what you mean. I guess it's just like
college is the last place to challenge your opinions. I feel like you should do it there more than any other.
I guess we could agree, I guess, by virtue of you debating people, that it probably shouldn't be the last place that you get challenged on things, right?
Well, I mean, the last place you're forced to be, because like after college, like it's not going to happen at work, and then past that, it's whatever you choose to engage in. You could go the rest of your life without really. But if you're in college, like I feel like part of like the reason why I like college for challenging people is because I could theoretically have the biggest anti-vaxxer in the world with the best anti-vaxxer arguments. He could give a student, he could give a speech to like a student body at some hall or whatever. And now because you're in college, you can take these conversations back to classrooms. You can talk to people that are very educated, tenured professors that can help you sort through that. Whereas once you're out of college and now you're seeing somebody on fucking Prager University on YouTube telling you this shit, now it's like, oh well, fuck, I don't know. I have no idea who to ask questions about. You know,
more like a function of like alienation of people from like communities and actual like group discussions post college. I think it's more so a function of college being like the last real communal experience that a lot of people have, right? Obviously, there's tons of people here. You meet friends, you meet people in classes. That fosters discussion, I think, more so than any institutional role does. And I think you're right in that you've identified that those factors are only exist in college uniquely versus like the things that people do beyond college, right? Like when you're an adult working, right, you don't give a damn about, oh, I'm going to go to class, have this discussion, right? You're just
you're not there to be challenged on your ideological opinions, right?
Like why are we calling this difficulty of having these challenge, I guess, a problem with wokeness and not so, I guess, like our focus on having discourse within society, right? We're not really.
Well, the reason why I focus on kind of the wokeness aspect, and then I'll let you respond. I'll give you the last word on this. The reason why I focus on the wokeness aspect is it feels like it's very scary sometimes for conservative issues to be brought up on campus in ways that aren't going to get you like reported, or in ways that aren't going to get you canceled, like screenshot on Twitter, doxed on TikTok or whatever. And that as long as that is the case, when people are boycotting conservative speakers, when all the professors and all the tenured people all have a certain ideological leaning, that you're not going to get people that are well-rounded and able to engage with people with different political opinions because they're only used to being surrounded by everybody that agrees essentially the same woke stuff that they do.
I mean, I guess I understand that. What I would say to that is Charlie Kirk was here on campus like 5 days before you, right? I have friends who are like obviously part of the LGBT community, right? And these people are all along speak by like posting shit about like, oh, the trans agenda, like all this nebulous stuff that doesn't mean anything. It kind of just comes across as like, oh, you're just like shitting on trans people without any like logical conclusion. I ask people like, oh, what do you mean by the trans agenda? They can't give you a straight answer, right? To these, like, to people of marginalized groups or who are like are allies of those groups, right? I don't really think they're given a form or an option other than to do some of the mass protests you're describing, right? If the marketplace of ideas was really like an equal place where we could actually have these discussions and have like logical conclusions and then have those conclusions translate into outcomes in society, right? Maybe like this engagement, this pure engagement strategy, this idea of let's go to college, let's have class discussions, let's have everyone challenge. Maybe that works, right? I think the structures of society that create power, right? The fact that people like Charlie Kirk have all this influence, they have all these platforms that like marginalized college students just can't possibly have, right? I think at some point it's unreasonable to expect that we all sit around, go talk to Charlie Kirk, and try to have this little discussion, and end up getting like posted in some like fucking conservative cringe compilation on YouTube, right? Like at some point, at some point you have to leverage those numbers to make a difference, to like, you know, show those people, hey, we're here, and like you can like talk shit in bad faith all you want, but that's not going to change the fact that like we're a group here, we don't want to like be marginalized by the shit you're posting here uncritically on campus, right? I understand in my opinion, I think forwarding as like wokeness has gone too far is maybe a little bit of a reactionary way of like, I guess, describing the issue. But I would say like the root of the problem you're describing just comes from other places. I think discourse is a lot more complicated than are you woke, are you not? Intolerance is like everywhere. It's really not just wokeness. It's, I don't know. Discourse is complicated. Anyway.
Okay. Well, hey, I appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
My name's Bloss.
Well, here you are. Do you think that wokeness has gone too far?
I think like when people use it as like, I guess their token value, it's weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I guess like Hassan is like the perfect example of it.
Absolutely.
I know. Like,
it's a perfect example of a lot of things wrong with society, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to be biased or anything. I don't want to seem like I'm like a total DGG stan over here, but I agree. Like, I think Hassan's like a prime example of like why wokeness has gone too far, and like how I think it's also has to do with like the radicalization of both political parties.
Sure.
I think like each party is trying to, I guess, be as radical.
Cut all the microphone up a little bit more, yeah.
I think each party is trying to be like as radical as possible to get the most votes or like people on their side, when it's like I guess, I mean, I know centrism is not the greatest because you don't really get stuff done, but it's the most like ideal ideology.
I feel like Biden is trying to do a good job at like being more like appealing to people on the right and left. It feels like he's worked really hard to bring people together to vote on stuff.
That's true. I will say, what was weird to me was how when Biden like made everyone get a free vaccine, like that was really good. But like the right kind of like villainized vaccines at the same time when Trump was like the original person who like.
True, and Trump says he's gotten vaccinated too. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like it was weird because like Trump, like everyone was commending him for like, I guess like speeding up the vaccine.
If it would have been, if Trump would have gotten reelected, every single Republican would be 100% pro-vaccine without any question whatsoever. It would absolutely be the case. Yeah.
But it's also that the left would be anti-vaccine too.
I hope they wouldn't be. And I know there were some statements made by
AOC.
It was either Kamala Harris or Pelosi were saying things like.
It was during the debate. I think it was during the debate.
Yeah, it was like, I don't know if I would trust 100% anything that would come out of the FDA under Trump, like something like that.
Yeah.
Probably not the best statements to make. I don't know how, if they would have been as hardcore as Republicans are. It's hard to say. It's impossible to say really, but yeah. Well, anyway, do you think wokeness has gone too far? That's the topic.
Sorry, I don't want to jump topics.
Yes,
I think wokeness has definitely gone too far.
Oh.
Especially like.
Well, fuck. Well, hold on. This is for people that disagree with me.
I'm sorry. Okay. Well, like I don't believe like complete. Okay.
Okay.
I feel as though like I agree with most of your points on a lot of things, but like.
Gotcha.
Sometimes I think you go a little either too far.
What do I go too far on? One thing.
One thing?
Yeah.
I don't want to trigger you.
You're not gonna trigger me. You can't possibly trigger me.
I don't want to sound dumb, but like I guess like
camera's overexposed, Jeff.
Does it have to be like?
Yeah, one thing. Go. What do you think I go too far? Name anything. Yeah, go. Trigger me.
The Kyle Rittenhouse thing. I think it was a little cringe. Like
I was completely and totally right on everything.
Okay.
100%.
Okay, I agree that it was his in his self-defense.
It absolutely was.
Yeah, but also like that's like leaving your door open, letting someone walk into your house and then shooting them. Like, come on, like you can't be that dumb. Like, why?
He was an American citizen in a city that he felt attached to with a firearm. Like, he had the right to carry.
I know, but at the same time, like you understand that imagine me going down to 6th Street when I just heard there's a bunch of stabbings with my firearm looking to kill someone. Like that's.
And if somebody attacked you and you killed someone, you'd be totally in the right to do it.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like. It's a little irresponsible and immature.
Is it though? Was it irresponsible?
Do we support vigilantism or like?
No, that's why I don't support the people that attacked him.
Well,
that was vigilantism.
Yeah, but okay, he went there.
So what? What if those two people would have attacked somebody else and killed somebody else?
I don't want to change the topic, but yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm trying to stay on topic, but like.
I'll give you the last word on it. Go ahead.
What?
I'll give you the last word on it. Go ahead.
Okay. I I just think what people understood about it was, yes, it was self-defense, but I feel like a lot of people didn't understand, or at least they didn't say outright that it was irresponsible and immature of him to do, because it was absolutely like, it was like he did not care about his health if he actually went there. I would never put myself in that situation.
Listen, all I'm going to say is, listen, the riots need to fucking stop. Okay?
I agree.
And if that means... No, I'm just kidding. But okay, well, listen, thank you, boss. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Destiny.
Yeah, have fun.
Thank you.
Be careful, yeah. See you later.
See you later.
Andy,
Andy, how's it going?
it's going good, man. So first, I want to know, like, why do you think it's gone too far?
I feel like in the United States right now, I feel like the left has their thumbs on like the cultural levers of power, and I feel like they're using that to disengage people from conversations. So the biggest issue I see right now is that people on the left and right fundamentally have lost the ability to even communicate in the same world, and I think we need to push for that more than any other thing, so that we can kind of like stay at least on the same page, so the country continues to function.
Well, damn. I mean, I completely
fuck, yeah,
agree
of
with
course
that,
you
like
do.
that opinion.
Well,
but I think
part of wokeness, I think, is like excising people from like the conversations.
No,
Like, we
I-
can't talk to people. These conversations are too risky. They're too fascist. They're too
well,
whatever.
yeah. Me and my friend were actually talking about this in the car right over here, and I think that wokeness is the ability to be awake. Like, I think that's kind of what it means, and it's the ability to be like self-aware to like yourself and the surroundings. So
Well, if we define it like that, then sure.
yeah, so we need wokeness, right? But we can't let it go too far.
The wokeness
So-
ideas and the policies, I think, are generally okay.
Yeah.
But the rhetoric is cancer.
Yeah, I think what we need is something called Aristotle's golden mean. So what that is there has to be a balance of both, right? Because you can't be too woke to where like, oh, because nothing will get done, right? You'll just cancel everything because you can't have a perfect world, right? But you can't be too unwoke to where you're kind of isolating yourself, like you don't see anything else, because then that's how you get like racism and things like that, because you don't understand other people.
I mean, I don't disagree, but that's
Okay.
my argument.
See, but I don't like.
My issue is
I-
that people, it's, yeah.
I
well,
think
I'm sorry,
that
we're saying
eventually it's going to push back to the unwoke side. I think it's always
Yeah,
going
but
to be
that's
this
my
ebb and
worry is
flow.
that, like, I don't want, like, an ebb and flow of ideas is good.
Yeah.
But an ebb and flow where it's like all these people, then all these people, then all these people, I don't think that's good.
So
like
what do
going
you-
from like a Donald Trump that has like the Supreme Court, the executive branch, both houses of Congress,
Mm-hmm.
all the way over to like Joe Biden, House, kind of the Senate, not the Supreme Court because we got fucked out of Merrick Garland, but
Yeah.
like seeing these like huge swings back and forth, I think is really deleterious to progress in society, especially because when we look at our main body for getting shit done,
Okay.
well, what is supposed to be our main body for getting shit done, Congress, we
Yeah.
can't fucking do anything because nobody can fucking
Well,
grant
yeah, I
anything.
mean,
And
there
then
were-
we end up relying on like the Supreme Court for everything.
Yes.
And you see that something that
as
the
long
Supreme
as you
Court can give
as
us
long as
can
you stack the
take-
courts, then
Yeah.
like nothing, then it's always in favor of the other side.
Yeah, which is bad. That's
Yeah.
not good.
No.
And I think that a
Well,
large
America
part of
was
that
never
is.
supposed to be a two-party system. Like,
Well, regardless
wasn't-
of whether two-party or not, I think the
Yeah.
issue is that we're having people that like won't talk to other people anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that when you can't
We're too
communicate,
afraid to.
Yeah, there's
We're
no
too
way
afraid to
to
offend.
compromise on anything because
Yeah.
everybody on the left feels like, well, my position is uncompromising. There is no compromise here, and it's like, okay, well then fuck us, I guess. Right?
Well, you have to compromise. That's the only way. Like, the only way to reach like the best for everyone is compromise.
Sure.
Like, that's how you.
But would you agree that like a lot of people that would describe themselves as very woke would say, I'm not compromising on these positions?
Yes, I do agree with that. I feel like that is a bad trait of
Wokeism going too far,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
wokeism
Yeah.
going too far. All right, but I think that we have to fundamentally agree that we need people
Of
to
course.
be woke.
Absolutely. I agree, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you, Andrew.
Yeah.
My name is Jackson Steele.
Jackson.
Yeah, how are you?
Pretty good. Okay, I think wokeness has gone too far.
I'm gonna disagree with that
Go
to an
for it.
extent.
To an
So,
extent, okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but
I will.
from what I've generally gotten from your point of view is that it's come at a point where we're too hostile to differing opinions.
Yeah.
And that we cannot have that in this day and age. Like, you have to be able to listen to ideas. And my stance is there has to be an extent to where we just refuse to debate certain ideas because it gives those ideas legitimacy, and those ideas shouldn't have legitimacy. And what I'm talking about is when it comes to ideas like stripping away rights from groups of people, I don't think we should give those ideas legitimacy.
I feel like, so I've heard this argument before, and the idea is that by entertaining a debate with a certain idea, you're in a way saying that that idea is worth debating. And I think that progressives have fallen into this mind trap where they basically said, this is kind of what I said earlier, where they feel like, well, I don't debate those things. That's not worth debating. I'm not
Okay.
even going to legitimize that with the debate. And I think the issue with that is, oh God, I should know this. There's a president that says something like, an ex-president Andrew Jackson, I don't remember. Somebody was like, the Constitution needs to be washed with the blood of new patriots or some shit. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about? Basically, the idea like you need a revolution every now and then to kind of keep the government honest and to keep everything fresh.
Oh, yeah.
I view it similarly to ideological wars, and that if you kind of have a whole bunch of ideas that are, well, obviously black and white people are the same. Obviously women and men need the same rights. If you just assert that without argument and you leave it there, it works for like a generation or two, but eventually people kind of forget why, and then you get these other figures that will kind of pop up and they'll start to challenge those ideas, and then nobody's really able to give a good response. You're like, oh, well, we're not here to debate whether or not like black people are fundamentally different than white people.
Okay.
And then what happens is you get all of these other actors on the right that will come up and be like, well, look at the crime rates. Well, look at civilizations. And then now you've got a bunch of people on the left that are like, well, I don't really know how to argue against any of this because I don't do these debates. And then a bunch of people in the middle are like, well, you guys don't want to talk about it. These guys do want to talk about it. And these guys are making some true statements. So I'm going to listen to what they say. And then you lose the ability to like convert
So
anybody to your
basically,
way
you're
of
saying
thinking.
is that every once in a while we have to reassert these truths.
Yeah, you've got to like
and-
relearn and reassert. Yeah, not just take things for granted. They need to be like provided with proper argumentation. And everything.
So, I mean, that's interesting. The problem is a lot of these people who try to challenge these fundamental ideas that black and white people are the same, women and men deserve the same rights, including people who are non-binary, transgender, so forth. The problem with that is that the people who tend to challenge that tend to be really just be alt-right grifters looking for attention and looking to just cause some chaos. When in reality, the world and the United States are already just so messed up as it is that we don't need people challenging ideas like maybe black people should be treated differently. No, like we shouldn't have those ideas because that just causes problems. I feel like in a way we shouldn't have to like reassert those truths like, okay guys, here are the ground rules, like we have to understand that black and white people are the same. Like we shouldn't have to do that before a debate. That should just be continued. That should be taught from an early age.
Yeah, I think there's like three problems I think I have with this.
Okay.
So one is, even if the people themselves at the top are grifters, their followers aren't. People actually believe this stuff.
Okay.
That's the first issue. Number two is some of the claims that these people make will be true, right? Like black people do commit more violent crime than white people in the United States. Like there are some descriptive claims that are true, or levels of educational attainment or IQ differences or whatever. There will be some things that are true. And then the third thing is that in the commission of having these debates or arguments, if you are able to provide a solid grounding for why you believe the things that you do believe, I think that it can branch out to other arguments as well, and it kind of strengthens and fortifies your overall position as a progressive. So for instance, if a race realist wants to come in and they want to argue about something like IQ differences or crime differences between black and white people, knowing the reasons why different groups of people commit crime in the United States is not only good for a race realist debate, it's also instructive for how you would debate things like systemic injustice, or how you would debate things like things related to the criminal justice system, or all sorts of other institutions that are causing disparities between like different groups of people. But if you never have that argument, like, and I could probably, well, I don't know if I could on this campus because all you fuckers are Destiny fans apparently, but like I could probably find a progressive where I would like, I could ask like, do you think there's like systemic injustice against black people? And like, yeah. And I'm like, well, how? And it's like, well, cops are all racist or judges are all racist. Like, well, really? Like, do the stats bear that out? And it's like, well, I don't know any of the stats. And it's like, okay, well, do you think it's like, what would be fair? And it's like, well, when no racism exists. And it's like, okay, you have no answers for any of these questions. How are you ever going to convince somebody that doesn't already fully agree with what you're saying?
I think what I've got. First I want to preface that I actually didn't really know who you were, so I'm not here like fanboying, which I think you would appreciate. Like, I'm not here to just, Destiny.
I know you don't know me because I don't have any Beto or Rook fans. No, I'm just kidding. You're all right.
But your point about having those debates, I mean, we've had those arguments before. We've had those arguments about how black and white people are not different biologically whatsoever, that men, women, and anybody else deserve the same rights. It's just the problem is that people don't tend to listen. You'll always, and another problem that we have that's new to this day and age is that we have a lot of echo chambers. People just regurgitating the same points. And the problem is a lot of these alt-right people tend to, when they have opinions that, or when they hear facts and statistics that challenge their points, they instead of challenging the statistics and facts back, they just they claim that the source of those facts are wrong, that it's messed up, it's controlled by some higher power, and then they'll just go back to their echo chamber, where they just keep hearing these points. And so the problem is, at a point you have to say, okay, these people are just not accepting these fundamental ideas, and we shouldn't be giving them any more legitimacy, any more attention, so that their echo chamber will expand and include more people.
Gotcha. Okay, I'll respond to this, and then I'll give you the last word on this. So I agree that when you're debating somebody, well, there's two things going on. One, the type of people that are willing to like have hardcore debates on ideas probably not going to have their mind changed very easily, because they're already like really dug in, because they're willing to have a debate about an issue. When I view changing people's minds, there's two things that I kind of view this as. One is you slowly change people's minds over time. I'm never going to get somebody with one debate and 180 their entire worldview, for sure. But I can start to plant the seeds of doubt. And for most of the emails that I've gotten for people whose opinions have changed, usually it started with like, I watched you debate this guy, I fucking hated you, but you said a couple things that kind of made me wonder, and then I kept watching, and then eventually it's like, okay, yeah, I think that obviously you're the smartest YouTuber alive, which isn't saying much because most YouTubers are dipshits, but that's typically how it works. It's like the slow process, like over time. The second part is, when you're having these conversations, the goal isn't necessarily always to get the guy that you're debating. It's the people that are kind of like listening that are a little bit undecided. And when you've got one side that's willing to say, oh, I'm not here to educate you, figure it out on your own, you're a racist and a bigot, and the other person is saying like, oh, I would love to educate you, come listen to me talk all about my race realist science. I've got like 100 different links on a pastebin where we can talk about all the differences between black people and white people. Well, the people that are kind of like independent in the middle are like, okay, fuck it, well, this guy wants to talk to me, and the other people say no, so I'm gonna go listen to them. So I feel like that's kind of why it's important to push the engagement, even if it feels like dumb ideas that are like already settled. Like when I hear a dumb idea that's already settled, that's fun for me, because I know that we can have like a conversation where it's like, I know all the talking points, I know how to shut it down, and like we can do this really quickly, as opposed to a lot of progressives, they act like they're like above the conversation, but I think in reality they're really afraid of it, because even talking amongst their peers, they wouldn't be able to justify any of the ideas they have relating to that topic. And then I'll give you the last word on it. Go for it.
Okay, so yeah, that's it. Okay, so that does happen. So there are independent viewers who are looking for someone to help them sway their opinion to one or either side. The problem is that these ideas that like men or women are equal, black and white people are equal, they are becoming more and more ingrained in how parents teach their children. So eventually we're going to have a generation where nobody believes that, or like the vast majority of people don't believe that these groups of people are inherently unequal. But so I can't get over the fact that just by debating these groups of people, like by debating these ideas, it gives them legitimacy, and I can't get over that. I understand what you're saying, that because like from an independent viewer standpoint, having someone tell you, why do I even have to tell you this, bro? Like, if I'm having to tell you this, then you're just racist. I think it could be worded differently. I think instead of calling them racist, maybe it's like more ignorant. But if you already don't know these like these truths, that men and women are equal, and black and white people are equal, then I don't know like what's going on with you. But that's becoming the minority, the minority, and we don't need people who are advocating for these opinions that are held by only a slight minority of people, where the vast majority of people are like vehemently opposed to them. So I mean, I don't really understand entertaining those ideas. But
okay, well, thank you, Mr. Steele. I appreciate it.
Yeah, have a good day.
Have a good one.
I'm Akram. So if we're defining wokeness, I think sort of something I thought about was that there's like two pillars to what we would call like wokeness or wokeism. Mm-hmm. The first might be, well, we just have to, aggressively pursue, what would you call it? Sort of like the social justice, or like the socially progressive stance, right? Okay. And then the second is like aggressively canceling people. And I think that if these things are decoupled, then if you can stake out the very progressive position without aggressively canceling people, I think that'd be a good thing for wokeness, but
fuck. Okay. Well, we entirely agree then.
Oh shit. Okay.
So I agree. I'm a very woke person, right? I think that like 14, 15-year-olds should have access to HRT if it's medically necessary. I think that like obviously I'm in favor of a whole bunch of like wealth redistribution, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
The problem that I have is like the ideological like orthodoxy that progressives want to infect every single fucking platform that they're on. It might be in discords where they say like if there's any conservatives in here, you either need to ban them or we're leaving. It might be in college campuses where they boycott and protest heavily, like a lot of conservative speakers. It might be in the real world where if somebody tweets something or TikToks something or says something that's bad, it gets clipped and their whole life gets destroyed.
Sure.
I wish that we could decouple that from a lot of like kind of the progressive ideas that they push for, because for the most part I'm like on board with almost all of them.
Yeah. Okay.
But we agree there.
I don't know. Because I also see it. I also.
What do you think I was going to fight for? What did you come up here for?
No, I mean like I sort of know what you stand for.
I don't think gay people should be allowed to get married. What did you think I was going to say?
No, I was just thinking like maybe there's like I honestly believe a lot in like self-policing speech and stuff. I think a lot of the stuff that wokeness has brought us is actually like a social good. Like, you know, people like laugh at like the really sanitized entertainment we have accessible right now, but I think that's honestly a really good thing to have cartoons that, you know, are sort of upfront about like their representation and what they stand
there are
for.
definitely things that are really positive today. Like I wish we could maintain a lot of the positive about the negative. So like the representation of minorities, older women in media has gotten way, 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 way better than it was even 10 years ago,
right.
Which is awesome. That's amazing. But I wish we could do it without everybody being like, fuck white people, we need the Mayo side, and all men are either rapists or rape supporters. I was like, Jesus Christ, like that's a little extreme. I wish we could get the positives without like, it was like people that play consoles. It's like it's not enough to just say like you're a PlayStation fan or an Xbox fan. You also have to say like, you know, fuck the other guy too.
I see.
Yeah, or like PC gamers versus console gamers. It's like I don't just like PC. I want a Holocaust like console gamers. And it's like okay, dude, like you're going a little far.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
yeah, I think that's my big problem with a lot of like the woke related stuff is it feels like there's a lot of kind of liberal ideas, or not liberal, progressive ideas that kind of all build towards this idea of we need to aggressively deplatform anybody that disagrees with us in any possible way we can.
Yeah,
You've heard of like the paradox of tolerance and how that's basically stretched and used to be like, if you have a Blue Lives Matter sticker, you're a fascist, you can't have any opinions ever, and you need to be kicked out of every like social form you're in, you know? And it's like, Jesus.
Okay.
But woke ideas are good. But so I guess do we agree mostly? I'll give you the final word when I go for it.
No, that's. I mean, I'm also sort of conscious about like how like because I got family that live like around the world, right? And you know, some things in different cultures are more like standard. You know, you see a lot of like sometimes like casual like racism and stuff.
Racism, sexism, for sure, yeah.
And I think like insofar as wokeness can combat that, I think it's like I think positively of it. You know, I don't really want to write it off, or like I want to see it like become a, you know, like a global force for good where everybody is more, you know, understanding and such. Yeah, you should send Nathan here though, for sure, for college.
Texas?
Yeah, UT. It's awesome.
I'll think about it.
We got a really good CS department.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
If he wants to, okay.
My name is Edwin Rios. I am Nazar Games on DGG.
Hey, what's up?
Nice to meet you. Before I go into the wokeness, do you feel like your Twitch and Twitter suspensions were justified?
I don't know why I was banned from Twitch, so it's hard for me to say. But I mean, like, insofar as like if it was discriminatory because of my issues on like trans women in sports, I mean, I guess it's justified from their point of view. I mean, I would. Sometimes the question isn't like, is a ban justified? It's like, should that justification exist, right? Like, I don't think.
You did discrete like degen things as well, where he was literally level
he did at the
of
campsite.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So it's not like he was like in the clean.
Well, there's nothing illegal about the campsite. There's a lot of people that run campsite stuff. You could say that's not good. The sex trafficking stuff, he was never convicted of anything there.
Yeah. I'll give you that. I'll give you that. But it doesn't change the fact that those are things that were happening probably within his household.
Well, I don't know if I would say I've had the FBI show up to my house 3 times because people report me for crazy shit online. I don't know if I would want that to be used as like an assassination of my character, but
no, I don't know.
Sure.
So it would be kind of problematic to see like you running like a live webcam show, pimping out a bunch of women, and I don't know. Maybe I don't know.
Okay,
And then. Yeah, but I guess you're like he said, you don't want to be the one platform like running that, and I don't think, and I think in your situation, you'll probably, Twitch never freaking bans anyone permanently anyway. You'll be back on the platform before you know it, and then stuff like that. As for wokeness, and has it gone too far? When it comes to like, I guess there's like different demographics of people too. For me, in the blue collar, white collar kind of sphere, I'm not really a college student or anything like that. I work at a particular car company. We're not going to talk about the car company. I feel like that. I think everyone gets a little bit of a different feed of what is wokeness. The mainstream media has been getting a lot more feed from the internet. Maybe it's a slow news day on mainstream media. Probably is a slow news as mainstream media is slowly dying. Obviously, now they have to pull more and more from the internet as the internet becomes the overall total melting pot of conversation and everything. So that's probably going to be fairly problematic, where like people are going to be more reactionary on the day-to-day. What is your solution to, because that's the one thing I haven't really...
I feel like culturally and socially, I think we should push people to engage people that we disagree with in conversation more. And we should accept that there can be people with like actual differences of opinions around us that can exist, and that's okay. Like we're not going to align 100% on every single topic. We don't have to align 100% on every single topic, and it's okay to exist in similar spaces.
I feel like I think that Americans' values generally kind of preach that. Unfortunately, a lot
American values do, but I think in social media it's given us the ability to separate more and more. Yeah,
American values.
I think we've become like, it's funny because they talk about we're becoming more and more different, but I think the problem is we're having groups split off. They're becoming more and more the same.
Yeah.
Like that we're very rigidly enforcing like sets of ideas among like the different groups that exist in the United States. I think that's really bad.
Yeah. I think I've heard a debate. You were talking about like conversations been changing, and there's like fractions of people that are totally just not interacting with each other.
Yeah.
And then those become very problematic. I do feel like though people do generally change after a while. Like as soon as you come out of college, you go into the workforce, you kind of get thrown into like your own little paradigm of things that could happen, and then generally it's up to you whether you want to like kind of grow or add
maybe,
more
but I mean,
stuff
like as
that.
like people are educated, like you see them grow up, and then like now in the corporate world, you see more and more stuff kind of coming out of like my generation as they get older, and I mean, we'd expect to see that filter out eventually, or not filter out, but filter down to where like whatever we're learning in college, like the most extreme people today are going to become the HR managers tomorrow, and then the CEOs of the next day, and et cetera. So I think it's worth paying attention to now. But
I feel like we're hiring those particular like classes of people that generally want to do like, obviously like diversity and stuff like that, and that's always going to be a thing, and that's
which is fine. I don't have a problem. I think diversity is good.
I don't really see. I feel like what you're saying is happening, but generally it needs to happen more. So we need to work towards programs, I guess, to like open the conversation up more. But there's a level of tolerance that you probably shouldn't have to deal with,
Yeah, for sure. Like somebody calling you like racial slurs, or somebody like being extremely hateful or antagonistic is probably not good.
We have terms of service for a reason.
Yeah, or like Milo Yiannopoulos being banned from college campuses because he was like, I think he was specifically calling for threats against like a particular trans student. Like I can understand people like boycotting that. That's totally fine.
We should have a limit. There should always be a limit. The problem about that is finding that limit and and trying to like convey that limit, unfortunately, is the biggest problem, I think, in society, because everyone has a different tolerance to that limit.
Yeah, I agree.
And then you had the abortion debate. I can't do that one.
Okay. Well, listen, I appreciate the conversation. And
yeah.
Thanks a lot. Have a good one, man.
Thank you.
My name is Lex Jeremiah, but with a 7 in the place of the J.
Your name is Jeremiah, but with a
7 in place of the J.
7 in place of the J.
So I wanted to go off 4 different branches of wokeness.
Okay.
The first one being deplatforming, which I'm sure you've talked about a lot today.
Gotcha.
So for me, I feel like, for the most part, deplatforming isn't super okay, because I like having a marketplace of ideas, whether they're crazy or like more reasonable. And I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm generally against deplatforming. There's going to be some exceptions where, like, yeah, this person probably shouldn't be here at all.
Yeah.
But the main worry that I have with deplatforming is people don't know how to argue against some of the stuff that's getting deplatformed.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of like vaccine skeptic people now in the United States more than ever before, and we've like aggressively banned anti-vaxxers. But like a lot of people don't know the arguments against vaccines, and they don't know how to argue in favor of them. So you kind of just like, if you ever have a person in the middle who doesn't really know, people on the right are going to be very eager to share all their information about vaccines with them. But the person on the left is going to say like, well, it's not my job to educate you, and then they're just like, fuck.
How do you feel about some people like using the argument that like if we let a bunch of crazy ideas out into the world that like, you know, it'll influence people like negatively, which I mean we see happen already, like we saw it happen with Trump, but like well, I guess what is your like combat?
I mean, this is kind of like the fundamental like buy-in for democracy is we have to let people hear ideas and make decisions. Like that's how our we've decided that that's the style of governance we're going to rely on. People are voting, not like elected officials are voting for us. Well, except sometimes for legislation. But yeah, so as long as we have the trust in the American population to vote on elected leaders in the form of democracy, and you kind of have to have the trust to let them hear a bunch of different ideas and decide for themselves, you know, how they want to.
Yeah, I'd say I agree with that. I've always thought that, like, you know, people will usually find a way. I feel like that's the case with you, is that even though you talk to a lot of crazy people and you allow those crazy ideas on your stream, like, you know, people will see, like, oh, this guy's actually, like, he makes sense and, like, he makes the ideas look stupid. So the second bench I wanted to talk about was kind of forced diversity in, like, workplaces and kind of that concept. The idea that, like, you know, workplaces will enforce having a diverse staff, right? But like, what makes them qualified? Like, are you prioritizing the fact that they're diverse, or like that they're actually like qualified for the job?
So diversity is weird because people try to make like, so on one end, so sometimes diversity is actually good just because it's a diverse group of people. There are some like really funny examples of like certain camera techs that can't capture or auto detect like black faces.
That's right.
And it's like, or like hand washers that like don't see black hands, and it's like, did you just have not a single black person in your entire staff to like do things? I've been to sometimes events where it's an all male staff working and there's alcohol being served, and they've just got like cups of alcohol served out on tables that are open for anybody to take, and it's like, okay, obviously you don't have any women on staff. You see things like this happen. So sometimes like having diverse people there are good just because different people do bring in different backgrounds, or they bring in different experiences where it's like, oh, like it's good that we had like this guy here because he's black or Indian or a woman or whatever, and it's like, because there's a bunch of people that are like, you know, just like white dudes, I would have never even fucking considered this particular thing. So in some cases, like diversity is good just for the sake of diversity, literally. In other cases, I think it's like okay to push for, like, I don't think there should be like a hardcore diversity quota where it's like 20% this, 20% that, 20% that. And I don't know how I'd go about enforcing it like on like a legal
more
level.
The idea of encouraging it.
Yeah, it's good to encourage it, if for no other reason, because the diverse workplaces can be beneficial to the people in there, but also because it gives other people like figures to look up to and aspire to. Like, it's important to have people that you can see are like successful, like you know, like, oh, like this person is you know, they're a woman or it's a black person and they're doing really well in this field, and I think I can do that too. There was something called the Scully effect from the X-Files, where the Scully woman, who was the partner of Mulder, I don't remember, it's a long time, but like that Scully woman was like a strong, independent woman who was like a scientist, investigator, whatever, and I think like she alone inspired like a whole like mini generation of girls to get involved in like scientific fields just because they saw that woman on TV doing that. So I think the representation is important because it inspires people to aspire to those positions.
When it comes to like systems of like government, you know how like people always argue that like it's not diverse enough, and I would totally agree too. When do you think we'll get to a point where like the government is full of more like diverse people, like
where the government is for say that.
The government is like the representatives are more like diverse, like we have a diverse like group of people up like
when are we going to have a more we might be in like the most diverse group of people right now, but it's still not that diverse. Politics is still probably largely gatekept by things like wealth and connections, which politically are probably still going to be like a lot of white affluent people. I mean, that's just a thing that hopefully changes over time as other communities gain more wealth, as other communities gain more representation. We've already seen it happening a bit, like where you're seeing like younger people, like people like AOC, like getting into Congress that represent like different skin colors, different backgrounds, different ideas, which is cool. Hopefully we continue in that direction, but yeah.
Okay, so the third bench I want to talk about was I'm a huge geek when it comes to entertainment and stuff like that. Like I'm into like superhero shit and all that other, like science fiction shit. And so with those properties, they've been around for hundreds of years, and like recently they've started to like diversify those characters, right? And how do you feel about like race changing or gender bending like characters? There's been like arguments that like, you know, it relies on the culture behind the character, but I feel like that's such a weird line to try and set, because like what does determine whether like someone's skin color is important to the character, right? So I guess how do you feel about that?
So
it's tricky.
It shouldn't be. I don't care if somebody's like race swapped or trans swapped or
Yeah.
what. I don't think that matters that much. I guess what I would say in general is like, to make everybody happy, you probably want to just make like new characters, because
Right,
it seems
yeah,
like,
that's- yeah.
like if the next Iron Man came out and he was black, like doesn't really matter. I don't like, some people get really mad at some shit like that. I don't think it matters that much if they want to like, or if the next Iron Man is like a black woman or whatever, like who
Right.
cares? But well, it'd have to be Iron Woman, I guess. But it's probably better to just make new characters, because
Yeah.
it seems like it triggers the fuck out of everybody else if you like start race swapping or gender swapping or whatever. But yeah, I mean, me personally, I don't care about it.
The most recent example I thought of like pertaining to this was the new Velma series. I don't know if you've like
Oh
heard
yeah,
about
the
it.
Velma's like a lesbian or whatever.
Like Velma's like a lesbian and Indian, and then Shaggy's like a black dude, and I'm like,
Is that
you know-
true?
yeah. And
Okay.
the thing is like, you're diversifying the characters, sure, but like making the stoner dude like the black dude, and then making the smart like girl like Indian, you know, it's like it's kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of funny. I didn't know that they did that many changes, but like at some point too, you probably to have like some like consistent character through time. You probably want to just like make new characters, right? Like,
Yeah.
but
And then I had one more. Oh, okay. So in terms of cultural appropriation, kind of relating to what we just talked about, what do you think determines whether someone is like culturally appropriating, like or
So-
appreciating?
cultural appropriation is a tough one. I think that. I think cultural appropriation is generally a garbage idea. I don't like the idea of like, obviously culture spreads and obviously people are
Right.
going to do other
Culture's
like,
meant to be
yeah,
shared
that's
amongst
always how
others.
it's going to happen,
Yeah.
right? But so here's like the issue. I think it's good to keep in mind that there could be racial or other types of structures around things,
Yeah.
and that explains why people might be upset about certain things.
Right.
So like a really good example of this is in my day we call it Ebonics. Today we call it African American Vernacular English.
Right. I was just about to
Nowadays,
talk about
especially
that,
through like TikTok and stuff, there's like a lot of black slang that's like super popular now amongst Zoomers, right? No
Yeah.
cap on a stack, all this blah 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 blah, blah, right? And like people are funny and they meme about it today and everything, and like everybody uses it and it's like cool and awesome, and it's like. Part of it becoming cool and awesome was like a lot of white people saying it on TikTok. And like 5 or 10 years ago, if you spoke like that because you were part of a black community that speaks like that, people look at you like you're an idiot, like you're an uneducated, stupid fuck who
Right.
can't speak correctly. And it's like, okay, well, fuck me. 10 years later, now everybody's using this language and it's like cool
Yeah.
and trendy and
It's like
hip,
you
and
get to wear my culture
Yeah.
and not like face
deal
any
with the negative
consequences.
repercussions of it.
exactly,
Yeah. So personally, I think that like we should celebrate when culture is like disseminated to other people, and like everybody should do everything, and like because that's how culture works. But I think it's good to be mindful that like you probably shouldn't completely shit on some people's culture, because 10 years from now it might be like the new popular thing.
Yeah.
And now you've got like this whole group of people that got completely destroyed doing a particular thing that 10 years later Justin Bieber is going to be doing on TikTok, or whoever the new young
Right.
celeb is today or whatever. Yeah, which I think is good to keep in mind. Mason.
Yeah,
What's
nice to
up?
meet you. So I think wokeism, when you say it has gone too far, I think that's kind of a non-statement. I think that implies that only recently it's become like a thing, and I know that y'all kind of touched on it earlier, but I kind of want to understand what you mean specifically. by
Yeah,
it's
I
gone
do
too
think
far.
it's recent. So I think that the unique thing that's enabled a lot of the problems, the disconnects we have in society today, are the internet. I think the internet has given us the ability to self-segregate into communities and avoid people with different ideas more than ever before.
Okay.
And I think that as progressives have kind of got like the levers of power on a lot of these social media platforms that contribute to this isolation, they kind of like rigidly enforce a certain type of idea on these social media platforms that's found like in the TOS and the type of people on them. That's kind of what I'm talking about. So I think the internet is what makes it unique today more than before in the past.
So you're saying more like wokeism is creating like echo chambers specifically on like social media?
Yeah,
and
and
stuff like that?
discouraging engagement with the other side, yeah.
Okay. But when you say it like that, like I think that's implying that people were going to be turned to one way or the other by seeing people like I think when people see Alex Jones and Andrew Tate and stuff, and they become like they become extremists or whatever, like radicalized. That was bound to happen. I don't think necessarily the left is gonna.
I don't think so. I feel like a lot of it is really predictable. Okay, we got to stop doing this, okay? Progressives seem to acknowledge, they'll say that environments are really important for creating certain types of people, but then they'll look at somebody that watches like certain like Republican people like, oh, that was a person that was always lost. That person is always evil. But like when you say that, somebody might do the same thing about a criminal. Like, who cares what school he went to? Who cares what neighborhood he grew up in? That kid was always going to be a thief. That kid was always
No,
gonna
no,
be,
no, that's
right?
not what I'm trying to. I'm saying as far as like becoming radicalized, like, is it creating echo chambers necessarily on Twitter? Do you think that this is pulling people to the left because now they have no people?
I don't think it's
on the
pulling
right
people
to
in
see?
any direction. I think it's getting people to not talk to each other. So people on the left will get more radicalized to the left. People on the right will get more radicalized to the right, and we're like flying apart at the seams, like unable to communicate with each
Well,
other.
so that's what I'm saying. So I think people who are radical right and radical left, the conversations that they have are just not productive.
Well, but I think the ability to keep these groups of people at least in the same room talking to each other at least grounds them out a little bit. Like, I don't mind like a progressive screaming about like 15 an hour minimum wage, 15 an hour minimum wage, and the crazy far right guy is screaming like no minimum wage, I don't want any at all. It's like, okay, fine, at least in the same room. But now when you go on Twitter, people are like 15 an hour is slave labor, like 25 an hour should be the floor, 30 an hour minimum wage is like barely acceptable. Like, it's getting so extreme on that side that it just because the two sides aren't talking anymore, now the radicals have become even more radical. Like, a radical position on the left 5 years ago is way different than a radical position on the left today.
Okay, yeah, where I disagree then is the fact that, deplatforming is creating like the extremism, the way that you're making it seem. I feel like when people talk on Twitter, they're not gonna have that productive conversation, no matter if Andrew Tate was banned or not. Like, there was no productive conversation that was gonna happen there, and no one who's in the middle, who's now no longer able to consume InfoWars on Instagram or on Twitter or on Facebook, is gonna somehow like not become. I don't understand.
I feel like this is the pipeline that I feel like exists. I can't empirically prove this or anything, okay? But this is what I feel like exists, okay? I feel like the way that it starts is somebody says, I have a question about vaccines. And then somebody on the left says, you have a question about vaccines? You're an anti-vaxxer. I'm like, well, no, but like, I'm just curious, like, do young boys need vaccines? Or like, is the myocarditis thing, is that like actually a problem I should worry about? And then person on the left will go, you're an anti-vaxxer. You're a fucking loser.
So every person on the left, just everyone does that though?
I really think that's what it feels like.
Okay.
Yeah, there's like this rigidity in thought where it's like you can't even ask these questions. And then, well, if no one on the left is going to talk to me, well, on the right, everybody wants to talk about vaccine skepticism. And it's like, okay, well, fuck. Like, that's why all the conversations about vaccines and their effectiveness essentially are relegated to right-leaning platforms, or Joe Rogan. Like, all of it is. Because people on the left like won't even like. It seems like they won't even have the conversation. It's either like you accept it or you're an enemy, a fascist. And
But
then,
you
like,
can
you're gone.
Google. You can just Google it though. Like,
if people don't want to Google, they want to watch a TV show. They want to watch somebody tell it to them.
Okay, well, if you look up talking heads, and the only like the most prominent ones are conservatives, and the things that they're going to be pushing is the false information.
Yeah, but
I
where
mean,
are the left people on the other side that are willing to like critically engage with those like concepts? That's what I'm looking for, and it seems so.
So you're
hard
looking
to
for
find.
left talking heads.
Yeah, like who are my Joe Rogans on the left, or my Jordan Petersons on the left, or my Ben Shapiro's on the left, or my Steve? Like, these are people like, I'll talk about anything. Like, give me the challenging blah blah blah. And the left is like, well, no, we can't talk about that. We're past that. We're progressives. We're too cool for that now.
But I think the opposite of saying the vaccines are gonna, make you infertile is being like, no, just Google it. There's no empirical
Yeah, but that's
data
the
to
thing.
support
You say,
that.
yeah, you'll say on the left, just Google it, and on the right they'll say, come watch my PragerU videos. Like, come watch this like Joe Rogan conversation where
so they're
this
just
guy's
better at baiting.
they're really excited about like educating you. Like, on the left, people are like, oh, I don't want to talk to you about that. Like, go and Google the studies. And on the right, they're like, bro, come watch this really sick podcast where we talk about how different like black people and white people are. It's like, Jesus Christ, you know?
Okay,
Like,
but then you're saying, at that point, you're just saying that they're like, conservatives specifically are just really good at grifting.
no, not grifting, at messaging and marketing. They're excited to tell you their ideas and they want to convince you. They like are hungry for it. And on the left, we're like, fuck you, I don't even want to explain it. You should already know.
I think that if I present someone if I show them there is no empirical connection between being infertile and taking the COVID vaccine or whatever, and they take that and they're like, oh, this is boring, but I really like to believe that my balls aren't going to work after I take the COVID shot, then that's you. That's not.
You have to find a way to package it and make it like digestible and entertaining. This is what conservatives have done, and they're so good at it.
But that's a different argument than saying that the left won't
But it's,
have the
it's
conversation
part of
with
the
you.
rhetoric of the left. Is that like, can we take our ideas and make them cool? Like, this is why Bernie Sanders was so successful. Bernie Sanders wasn't out here arguing for strong policy positions from an empirically supported foundation. He had awesome slogans. He got people really excited to listen to him, like shout at people, like college education is a human right. But like, he had these things, and he was really good at doing that sloganeering, and it's why he got so popular with young kids. But now that Bernie Sanders is gone, we have like nobody. It's like, oh, that was it.
Well, at the time, he was just the most progressive figure.
But he wasn't just the most progressive figure. He was exciting. Like, you got hyped listening to him do his slogans. You got hyped listening to him do his town halls and talk to people about, like, this is why you should do that. He answered hard questions. I remember on a town hall, a lady asked him, is like, I have like 15 employees. Are you going to burden us and make us provide health care to our employees? And Bernie Sanders was like, yes, I am. You should. You make enough money. You should do it. And he was like a really exciting, like, funny dude to watch. I was like, cool. I'm not even like hardcore progressive, and it was like exciting to watch Bernie do his stuff.
Yeah.
But like, now that Bernie's gone, like, who stepped up to do that?
But again, I think that has more to do with the fact that, and I don't know why you didn't like the word grifting when I talked about it, but like
grifting implies they're like fake beliefs, I guess.
I think that, but that's what I mean, except for like the exception of like Alex Jones, because I think he's just mentally ill, genuinely. But like, I don't think Ben Shapiro or Steven Crowder or these people who are sitting here doing like this format in college campuses genuinely believe the things that they're saying.
They might not, but their fans do.
But
that's all that
what
matters.
grifting is, though, like, right?
Well, sure, but even if we say they do, that's what matters. Like, the fans do believe it. So maybe we need better grifters on our side.
That's what I'm saying. So
like,
maybe that's what you're saying, because I don't see, like, if I watch a left political commentator or whatever, and they do cover news stories by showing statistics and stuff like that, okay, it's more boring. But when the right has grifters, their talking points are more.
They're entertaining. We need another like Jon Stewart.
Oh, I mean, okay,
that's important for us. Like Jon Stewart on the Daily Show was.
We
a
can
really
say that, but
important
again,
thing,
I think that's completely separate than saying that the left is like willing to engage with you. Maybe they're just more boring. But
it's not that it's more boring. It's that I think that unwillingness to engage comes from this idea of like, I shouldn't have to make my ideas like digestible for you. You should know that they're true. That's what it feels like it comes from. Not like it's really hard to make this digestible and understanding. It's more like you should already know this. That's the feeling that I get. I could be wrong, but that's why it feels like there's that reluctance to engage on that more like entertaining but critical level.
Okay. I guess we just. But let's move on.
Well,
I
you're
don't
just
keep,
wrong. No,
I don't keep talking in circles. I'm so scared to look at chat after this.
Don't worry about it. Who are you in DGG?
What?
Do you have a chat name?
No, I don't.
Oh, you're good. Then. You're fine. Don't worry about it.
So, oh yeah, cancel culture specifically. Just real quick. I think the only time where I'm like, yeah, cancel culture is too far. The only time is when. If I said something when I was 14,
yeah, like
right?
minors having stuff from like 5 years ago.
Or like when it gets really bad, it's like Tobuscus. I don't know. I didn't look into this, but obviously he got canceled a few years ago on YouTube. Now he's doing like alt-right, like bad, conservative. He got radicalized, I think, solely because he got canceled.
I think the same about Brett Weinstein, the Evergreen College, the guy. Do you know who that is?
Mm-mm.
Oh, I think Brett Weinstein, when he got canceled, I think he got hardcore radicalized. I think that people get triggered when I say this, but I think Kyle Rittenhouse was always going to end up getting like hardcore, like be a far right. He's probably going to go to be like a Nazi or some crazy shit, even though some people think he always was. But it's because as soon as that stuff happened, everybody called him fascist. Blah, blah. It's like, well, of course they're going to go one way.
Well, yes, but he was already standing there with a gun, ready to kill someone, though. So
that's a whole different topic.
I know, but I'm saying I think that man was already far right. You're not going to a CVS with a rifle if you're not on.
Well, that's a whole other topic.
Anyways, but yeah, I think any other case of canceling is just. It's not. It's a non. Like if Twitter kicks someone off of their platform because they deem them to be harmful for whatever reason. So be it. Like that's what it is. And most of the time when that canceling is like when Kevin Hart. I don't know. I mean, he cheated on his wife for like something like that, and then for a week people are mad, and then people forget about it, and then he goes on tour and he still makes hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And
yeah, some celebrities like Louis C.K. is fine. Like some celebrities.
The only time canceling is really a thing is if you're deplatformed, right? So like Alex Jones or like Andrew Tate. But even then, Andrew Tate has Hustlers University. Alex Jones has InfoWars. I mean, except for the lawsuit now, they are making so much money. It doesn't matter. Like cancel culture is just not. It's just a non-factor.
Well, I mean, most people that get canceled get fucked, right?
Most people, you think?
Yes, like 95% of people.
So are you talking not celebrities, but just like everyday people?
Yeah, if a normal person gets canceled, they're pretty fucked.
I think it depends on what they did, and obviously.
I don't think it depends. I think even for dumb, like, did you follow like the Bodega Boy story?
Yeah, I saw that.
That was so like he was like kind of dumb or silly, but like. That's a guy. This is what I hate about the Bodega Boy story. That's a guy who in 1 year would have looked back and have been like, oh my God, like I thought so much dumb shit about New York City before I actually moved here because I'm a kid from fucking Ohio. But instead, like he said like one or two like kind of dumb things, and now he's gone. He's back to Ohio. Like that dude is radicalized. I guarantee you that guy's like posting on fucking Stormfront right now about like how fucking evil progressives and all this shit are. Like just because of his experiences getting canceled.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. I'll agree on that then. Like if you're just an everyday person and you do something that's bad but not necessarily should cost you your entire career, your life, then yes. But as far as when
some celebrities will survive if they're big
I
enough,
think
yeah.
most celebrities will sell out unless they're deplatformed. But it takes a pretty substantial, position to be deplatformed.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's all. Yeah.
Well, hey, thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. Yeah, have fun. What's up?
Amari, nice to meet you. Right now, I'm kind of in the middle when it comes to trans people in sports. This is completely different than everything here, but I would like to know, I guess, your ideology when it comes to it, because I'm very in the middle. I see both sides very well. I'm very progressive, so I see the point of like, oh, well, inclusivity, and because they're so, I guess, like underprivileged, what is it called? Anyways, underprivileged, and they don't get enough representation. How do you, I guess, include them in such a thing where there is an advantage, even with hormone treatment and stuff like that? I don't know the exact research behind it, but what's your ideology?
Yeah, so this is what I believe, based on I had a lot of different coaches, a lot of people that worked in professional and non-professional athletic events. This is what I was told, and this is what I believe. Sports in grade school and even high school is about like building camaraderie. It's about like participating in an after-school event, like doing something to build yourself as a person. Insofar as that goes, I think if you identify as a woman, you identify as a man, you should be able to participate wherever you want, because it's grade school and it's high school. Once you get to college and you're at like the NCAA level and you've got like limited spots for people, I think you have to take a more strict view, because people there aren't just doing college sports just for fun. Some of this stuff is like scholarship based. Some of this stuff is like leading to future careers. Like it's a way more serious thing with really limited slots. And at that point, I think we need to take a really hard look at the science and see like, well, where are we at here? And where I'm at on that conversation right now is that like I think you have an open division where anybody can participate, and then I think you have like a cis women position, and I don't think you can have trans women competing with cis women, because right now the data doesn't seem to support the idea that they're competing on an even level. But I mean, like that's a really hairy topic, but yeah, I would say up through high school people should be able to compete wherever they want, but once you hit like the collegiate level, things get a lot different. And then private leagues are, they can write whatever rules they want for whatever leagues they have, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I completely agree with that. That's valid as fuck. One more thing is, I was talking with Mr. Kirk last week whenever he was here across
Charlie,
the street. Yeah, that crazy guy. I feel like a lot of his arguments are strictly based on being consistent. Like, what's your, I guess, like why do you think his like ideologies are what they are? Like, do you think it's because he's just trying to be consistent? Because a lot of it is just like, I have this belief because if I don't have it, my argument falls apart.
I mean, like, I think you have to be consistent. It's like, well, arguably it's the most important part of any belief system is it has to be consistent, because if it's inconsistent for boring philosophy reasons, it falls apart. But I don't know why he believes the things he does, because I'd have to dig into his. I don't know Charlie Kirk's platform, the Turning Point people. I haven't followed them as much closely, but
it's not worth it. Don't worry, it's not worth it. His ideologies and stuff. It was very like grade school-esque.
Sure. Well, yeah, a lot of the college speech guys are. They just come to beat up on people with like the elementary arguments and then they leave. But yeah.
Well, it was nice to meet you, of course.
Yeah, I appreciate it, dude. Thank you very much.